Okay. Okay, I'll ask Dave. Okay, welcome everybody. It is Tuesday, April 19th at 12:07 p.m. This is a work session for the Provo Municipal Council. Meetings of the Municipal Council are being held in hybrid fashion. That is, members of the public can view council meetings on YouTube or Facebook, or they may attend in person in the council chambers at the Provo City Center. I'll remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. I am George Handley. I'm vice chair. I'm joined on the stand by councilors Rachel Whipple, Catrice McKay, and Dave Shipley. We have Bill Fillmore online, and I believe we will be joined later by Shannon Ellsworth and Travis Hoban. The opening prayer will be offered by Dave Shipley, and after that, we'll continue. Thanks.
Our Father in heaven, we thank thee for an opportunity to learn and serve together. We thank thee for all that thou hast blessed us with. We thank thee for beautiful weather, for facilities to meet in, for opportunities to speak freely and gather. And we ask a blessing upon those in the world at this time that don't have those freedoms and are suffering. We ask a blessing upon all of us to have courage to try to help and try to find ways to lift and encourage others around us and around the world. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, it is proposed that we approve the following minutes: February 15th, 2022 council meeting minutes, March 15th, 2022 council meeting minutes, and March 15th, 2022 work meeting minutes. Are there any objections or requested changes? All right, seeing no objections, I declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. Although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions, and unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to speak until called on by the chair, or in this case, the council vice chair. We'll begin with item number 1, which is a discussion regarding the combining of the Council Water Conservation and Foothills Protection Committees into one Natural Resources Committee. And this will be presented by John Magnus, our interim Council Executive Director. And I apologize, I didn't finish introducing the mayor and the deputy mayor who are joining us, and Brian Jones and John Magnus, who are also on the dais. Apologize. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Council. So what we're asking is, right now we have a bunch of different committees that meet and do different kind of work. What we're finding out is we're getting more and more kind of environmental resource issues that are coming forward. Our trails plans, the lake plans, the different parts of the general plan that are coming forward that deal with natural resources, and we don't have a really good fit for it. So what we're proposing is to change the Hillside Protection Committee and make it a Natural Resources Committee, and then absorb the Water Resources Committee into that one. And the new committee would be responsible for anything that deals with natural resources, be it water, land, the lake, trails, parks. And it would be a standing committee. So anything that we would have in the future that deals with natural resources would have a natural home now in this committee, instead of trying to shoehorn it in or create another ad hoc committee to deal with this one issue. So that is what we're proposing, and now that's what we're asking for.
Thank you, Mr. Magnus. I'll just add, as a member of both of those committees, we've discussed this with Councilor Ellsworth and Councilor Fillmore and staff, and we all agreed this was a common sense move. Are there any questions about this? All right, then I will call for a vote on, or no, I need a motion, right, for the approval of this recommendation.
I'll move to.
Okay, Catrice McKay moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Rachel Whipple, second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, we'll call for a vote. And I'll begin with myself. I vote yes. Councilor, let's see, Fillmore?
Yes.
Councilor McKay?
Yes.
Councilor Shipley?
Yes.
And Councilor Whipple?
Yes.
And we have Counselor Hoban and Counselor Ellsworth excused, so that's 5 in favor and 2 excused. We'll move to item number 2, which is a resolution approving a substantial amendment to the program year 2019 annual action plan, reprogramming CDBG-CV funds for COVID-19 public health response. And we'll have Dan Gonzalez, our management analyst, present that. Welcome, Mr. Gonzalez. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me some time here. Put my timer there. So, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, HUD assigned some funding through CDBG funds, the Community Development Block Grant funds, to the city, an allocation total of $1.2 million and change, with some particularities about the funding so that it could be used as quickly as possible. One of the things that we need to look for is that there's preventing duplication of benefits, since there are so much funding out there. They suspended the 15% cap that is typical for CDBG on public services. And every time that we are engaging in a project, then we need to do a substantial amendment, which is what we're doing here today. So just to give you an idea of the type of projects we have been doing with this funding, lots of these are public services, some food assistance programs, some public service where the capacity has been increased or the need for the capacity has been increased. We're still using the 20% of the allocation for administration costs. However, I anticipate that we will be reprogramming a good chunk of that funding for other projects. So far, we've used about $30,000 of admin on that. And again, this is since 2020. So I anticipate a good chunk of that will be reprogrammed here in the near future. Some public facilities and improvements projects. And some a program for small business to assist them with gap financing so that they can stay on business or rehire or retain employees. Just a little preview on that small business program. We have received 12 applications so far, funding about $65,000 that we'll be disbursing for those businesses. That was 12 out of about 60 different businesses that solicited applications. We're reaching back out to those that solicited application but have not submitted it so that we can help them. I would anticipate there's a little bit of angst due to the paperwork and the requirements specific to this grant. So we'll be reaching out to them and offering some technical assistance so that we can assist, we can use this funding. So the projects for which we are here today are they fall on the capital, on the public services side. The first one is along with City of Orem and Utah County, assisting Community Action Services, their financial learning center. This is a capacity issue. Out of the $25,000, Provo would be participating with $10,000. MAG this is the second round of funding for the Meals on Wheels program. Previously they received an award of $75,000, which they have used, and they still have, they have even now a waiting list to be able to serve seniors. So Provo will participate with a third of that, $25,000. Utah Regional Housing, it's a nonprofit for the Provo City Housing Authority. Due to the pandemic, it was necessary for them to hire a security firm to provide not only assistance to the residents in their facilities, but to the neighborhood as well. And so $42,000 would be to assist them with that. And the last one there is the Franklin South Community Center, which the city owns the building, but it's leasing out to United Way. It's an expansion on that building, on the patio, so to provide the ability to provide programming and other services outside, again, in support of COVID-19 or preventing any passing on diseases and of that nature. In order to fund those projects, then we're also proposing a reprogramming from some of the other programs that had received some funding. From the small business assistance, which maybe you saw that there's about $555,000 for it. We're proposing to take $1,400. And then from the mortgage assistance and the rest of rental assistance, these amounts, $65,000 and $90,000, were the total that originally was allocated for those two programs. So the city did not use that funding in that respect, mainly because we have been communicating and coordinating with other agencies in the city and in the county. It's not that people are not receiving funding, but again, there's so much funding from so many different sources, and looking for that, avoiding the duplication of benefits, that we've been coordinating to see if we could use some of that funding. So far, where we are right now and where the pandemic stands, we do not anticipate needing that funding for those particular uses. So we propose to reprogram that funding to use it on these public service projects. Well, that was about 5 minutes. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Councilor McKay.
I'm new to this, and I was just really curious, who decides where the money goes and how often do we do this?
So we solicit from nonprofits and others what their needs are. And the three entitlements, Utah County, ORM, and Provo, the administrators gather applications, and then we come and propose those. So you decide whether those projects are being used.
So is it a board though is Orem involved, and since they're on it also, are you part of the board? Is it like you guys receive tons of applications, I'm sure. And does the board themselves vote on exactly where the money's going to go?
So for this particular type of funding, the CDBG-CV, we do not have a separate citizens committee for it. Orem and Utah County do have, what do they call them? I forget. They have their groups, citizen groups that review those. For Provo, we bring them to the council, and that's how the decision is made.
Yeah, but we're not choosing where the money goes. We don't see the other applications that didn't get picked. So who did that part?
The CDBG administrators from the three entitlements.
Okay. And how often does this process happen? Like how often does the CBG funds come through that we reallocate on?
For this particular type of funding, it came with the pandemic. It's a one-time only thing. And so, yeah, we need to use all of this funding by 2026, but by next, I believe it's July or September, I can't remember exactly, we should have used at least 80% of the funding.
Thank you.
So maybe just as a follow-up, so this is essentially a report that's a little bit describing what's already happened as a result of the CARES Act money.
Correct.
And what's currently on the docket for what's going to happen.
Right.
Okay.
So this is the fourth time that we've come to make adjustments on this. The first time was the first tranche. It was about a little over $700,000. Second time was about 6 months later, with about 400,000 and change, which bring the total to $1.2 million. Then we did an amendment in July of last year to add some other projects and reprogram some funding, and this time.
So do you, in our upcoming conversations about ARPA funds, is there, it feels like, for me personally, I don't know if other counselors feel similarly. I just want to make sure that we don't shortchange any of these needs in the community before we look at other priorities. And so your perspective on since you're on the ground talking to these organizations, you know what they need, what their needs are, what their wants are, right? In terms of how well they can serve the community. I think maybe this would be a conversation to sit down with you at some point, but I'd love to get a sense of what you what you see going forward would be helpful to these organizations in terms of funding.
Okay.
Go ahead. Councilor McKay.
I know we do have an ARPA committee, so we could invite him to come talk to us about the particulars of what he sees as a need to.
That would be great.
Okay.
I see Travis Hoban has joined us. Welcome, Travis. Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Councilor Whipple.
I was just wondering how these CARES funds affect the regular CBDG budget.
How do they affect it?
Yeah.
They don't impact it.
So the regular programs that you're doing continue unaffected by this
Correct.
chunk.
Yeah. So even though the regulations are very similar, there's no impact. So meaning we don't get less or more because we're receiving this funding. Maybe that's what you were trying to get to.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that spending money on these projects with the CARES funds does not affect the regular operations and the regular grants and work that you do.
That's correct.
So it seems that this is more administrative work for you to do because it's the same organization administering these funds. But this is just extra money to do these projects.
That's correct.
All right. Seeing no other questions, this is this coming up later again? This is going to be heard tonight, right? First of two public hearings. And we'll anticipate adopting a resolution on May 17th that will be approving the amended plan for submittal to HUD, otherwise known as HUD. All right, thank you. If there's no other questions, we thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, for your time.
All right.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 3, which is Mr. Gonzalez again, a resolution approving the 3-year annual action plan of the 2020 to 2024 5-year consolidated plan. Go ahead.
Thank you. And so this is that regular CDBG and home funds that we have been receiving annually for the last couple of decades or a little longer than that. And so the city receives both of those. CDBG as its own entitlement. Home in the county, Provo is the only city that qualifies by HUD formula to receive funding. But we created a consortium since '92, which has had a little bit of change. But as of now, Provo City, the City of Orem, City of Lehigh, and Utah County as a whole, as an urban county, are the members of that consortium to receive home funds, which allows more of the funding to stay in the community, in the county at least. We're working here with estimated funding, even though the budget has been appropriated. HUD is still working out on how much we will be actually receiving. And so by the time we come back in May 17th, we should have actual allocation amounts. But we're working with what we received this current year. And we anticipate there's going to be a little bit of a change on that. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but not too much. So $1,363,000 for CDBG, $1,490,000 for home, adding some program income and some projects that have been completed and did not use all the funding. So the total for CDBG is just shy of $2 million, and for home is 2.2, and a little more on that. So these are the entitlements in Utah Valley, Provo City, City of Orem, City of Lehigh, and Utah County. And since 2019, we have partnered to streamline the process for public service agencies so that they don't have to have 4 different applications and that we don't have to be reporting in triplicate or 4 times the projects that they're doing. So public service agencies all apply to a regional joint committee. And after review of applications and listening to presentations, these are the recommendations for that committee. You can see the 3, there's a pointer here, isn't there? There we go. You can see the three entitlements right here. And underneath one of each of those columns is what each entitlement would be providing for public services. Provo City participates with $204,000, which is 15% of the estimated allocation. Within the Department Development Services, we run a few in-house programs. One of them is the Emergency Home Repair Program. This is focused and targeted to individuals over 60 years of age with disabilities or active military. And they're able to apply for emergency situations. The roof is leaking, the water main broke, that type of thing. With construction costs as they have continued to go up, the program included a grant of up to $7,500 and up to $15,000 where it would be a loan if they needed that much. Again, based on costs, there's no project now that is less than $10,000 or $12,000. So the proposal is to change the grant from $75,000 to $15,000. And that's the only change in any of the programs that we're running. So this is what we're anticipating. Again, $1.9 million. Where's that go? There you go. 1.9 is what we expect to receive. And we have the ability to take 20% for administration costs. That's $272. And then for the programs that we run in-house, the commercial facade, the down payment assistance, egress windows, and the emergency repairs, we're looking for these amounts, which total about $35,000, $45,000, I think, for program delivery, which is the cost involved with working with those individuals that receive funding in those programs. And then the rest of the capital projects are down here. You may remember or may know that a few years ago, the city borrowed against their CDBG entitlement to do a project for the airport, for Duncan Aviation, to bring jobs. And so for the next, I think we're on the third year now, for the next 10 years, we've repaid from our entitlement the principal and interest on the amortization of that loan, which was $2.5 million. So we set aside $252,000 to make the interest payments and one principal payment that is required every year. And then the rest of the capital projects, this is also reviewed by Citizens Committee. And these are the recommendations to use the funding. I'm happy to go into detail in any of those if you want me to, but I know you're short on time. So this is the funding for home, estimated at $2.2 million. And the only two projects to move forward. One is down payment assistance for Provo City, recommended $100,000 for that. So far, there's a balance of about $350,000 currently for that project. And rural housing would be receiving, I believe it's $2 million. Home has a required set aside for community housing development organizations, or CHODO. We must set aside at least 15% of the estimated allocation to those types of organizations. Rural housing is a CHODO. And they're proposing a project in Salem to build, I think it's about 160 single housing units. So that's home. And that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to address those questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Councilor McKay.
I'm so sorry.
You're okay.
Okay, so this is the regular CBG that happen every year. I'm curious again who the committee is then for this group you mentioned. So I assume it's people from Orem, Provo, Lehigh.
So for the joint, we have a variety. So we have 3 representatives from Provo, 3 from the county, and I believe it's either 2 or 3 also from Orem.
Okay.
And they review all the public service applications.
So who are the people from Provo?
Saraya Hillam was one of them.
Is it staff?
Sarah,
Is it city staff?
Saraya Hillam is the neighborhood chair for,
Okay.
neighborhood vice chair for Mazer. And then Sarah, I forgot her last name, but she's the chair.
So it's
of-
3 residents. Is it appointed then by the mayor? Is
Right.
it- Okay.
So every 5 years, we submit a consolidated plan, and along with it, we also submit a citizen participation plan. And in that, we establish who's going to be part of those committees. And for CDBG, for both public services or capital projects, it involves neighborhood chairs or vice chairs if they're not available.
Okay, that's great.
And then there's at least 3 other individuals. In this case, John Borgett was part of the Capital Projects Committee, along with other neighborhood chairs. Brad Bishop, which has self-help homes that are located here in Provo, and Karen McCandless from Community Action.
Okay, thank you so much for being patient with me on that.
Oh, you're good.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. We'll hear this item again this evening as well. So,
Yes.
thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to item number 4, which is an ordinance amending design standards for the West Gateway Zone. This has citywide application. Dustin or Bill Pepperoni will present to us.
This application was initiated by a member of the Design Review Committee because recently it just was kind of realized or discovered that the West Gateway Zone doesn't have the same design standards as the Gateway Zone immediately to the east and some of the other downtown zones that we have. I was involved in the writing of this zone with Dave Harding when he was still a neighborhood chair. This was his neighborhood or is his neighborhood. And I can't remember, to be honest with you, why design standards weren't adopted into this, if that was something we simply overlooked, or if it was done consciously. But to the staff, it doesn't seem to make much sense that we would have one set of design standards to the zone immediately to the east, but not also into this zone. So it just makes it consistent.
All right, any questions for Mr. Pepperoni? Councilor McKay?
Sorry, it's my day.
Fired.
Okay, so I was thinking about this, and I love design standards. That'd make everything very high if I just had whatever I wanted. But I have 3 friends building a home right now. And what's been interesting watching them go through the process is that their bank won't even give them a loan big enough for like the original house they bid a year ago, right? And every week their bids are changing. They've had to lessen their design standard before they can put a hole in the dirt because they can't afford it. It's just crazy. It's going on. So just with your experience, since you know about building and construction, and I'm wondering about commercial down there. Do you think this design, because that's an area that needs to be redeveloped, right? We all know that. Is that price-wise, do you think this new design standard is going to set back redevelopment there years, or that it's not going to equate on paper to work for developers? I don't know. I'm just curious.
That's a good question. We just met with some developers this morning talking about escalating construction costs, and they're going up dramatically across the board. With design standards or without, they're going up. Yes, if you have design standards that raise that bar, then yes, I would imagine there would be an incremental increase in those escalations that are already going up. Whether or not those increases themselves, those changes, those additional design standards, whether or not those by themselves are enough to cause a redesign of a project, I don't know. But it's certainly without question that we're in an unprecedented time right now with construction costs going up.
Other questions? So this is also scheduled for this evening's meeting when
Yes.
we'll be taking a vote on it. So, all right. Looks like no other questions for you. So we'll look forward to talking again
Stay
tonight.
here because I'll represent the next one too.
Okay, all right. You're ahead of me. I hadn't flipped the page yet. So item number 5 is an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 0.17 acres of real property generally located at 1029 West, 1020 North from one-family residential to low-density residential in the River Grove neighborhood. Mr. Pepperoni.
So this request is in order for the property owner to have a main dwelling unit and then an accessory dwelling unit. When this first came in, anytime a zone change comes into staff, the staff meets as a staff in our staff meeting and we talk through it. What should our position be? We were comfortable with this because of recent council discussions regarding encouraging ADUs. This type of request, I think you'll get more often. If this is approved, I think you'll get it more often in order for people to get ADUs or have them. So if you're not comfortable with this, if the staff has picked the wrong tool or is heading in the wrong direction, your clarification on that would be helpful.
I have a question about that. I mean, you know that we're in conversations about looking at possible implementations of a incremental increase of ADUs. And, you know, we obviously haven't had that discussion. We haven't had any vote on it. But if that were not to go forward, or if it were, what difference would that make to this particular proposal? I mean, if I guess my question is this: if for whatever reason that were defeated, it didn't go forward, the council didn't recommend it, would we simply just end up getting a lot more of these kinds of requests? If it did go forward, would you expect we would get fewer of these? Or you don't really know?
Can't answer that because I don't know what you're anticipating. If you opened it to the R18 zone, then obviously this wouldn't even be necessary.
Right.
So it's hard for me to guess on that since I don't know yet where you're going and where this will land.
So there's also the neighborhoods can always ask for an overlay zone. And we've actually, some of us have been in conversation with one neighborhood that is looking pretty seriously at that. In addition to what the committee is already looking at, this kind of happened independently on its own. That's another tool, correct?
Yes.
I mean, if it's not something that, in this particular case, was there ever a discussion about a neighborhood request for an overlay zone, or was this just one solitary case? Everyone said that looks great, but
I think it was just a solitary case, but I'm not as familiar with the details as Mr. Wright. So I'm not sure of that. I think it was an isolated case. Did you have some input?
I watched the planning commission. It was an isolated case, but the neighborhood they had no issues with it except for parking, which was addressed.
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Chair, I attended that neighborhood meeting when they discussed this. The neighborhood consisted of 3 people. There's only 3 that attended. So that's one of the issues we've been trying to deal with when we talk about these is how many people actually show up so we can say the neighborhood. But they were all generally positive of it because they were all supportive of accessory dwelling units.
And is there a scenario in which, say 3 more of these kinds of proposals pop up in that somewhere on that map, right? At some point, does the neighborhood say, "Hey, instead of going with the LDR zone, let's not let that multiply and replenish because that's going to kind of mess things up. Let's have an overlay zone." What would happen to that zone, to this particular zoning request? Would we just leave it?
Yes.
Okay. We wouldn't need to
The
go
absence of
back.
an overlay zone, I don't believe, would change the zoning of this unless the overlay zone anticipated that and changed the zoning as part of that overlay process. Does that sound about right, Mr. Jones?
Yes, I think that's correct. So you're assuming that this gets approved before that
Yeah.
happens, right? Yeah.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Pepperoni? All right, we'll have this one again later this evening as well. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to number 6, which is a presentation regarding the fiscal year 2023 budget regarding the airport. Dave Decker, Public Works Director, will present, and we have 35 minutes for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Handley, and thank you to the council for the opportunity to present on a little bit more on the budget for Public Works. You may recall a couple of weeks ago when I did the budget for Public Works, we skipped 2 different sections, the airport and also the fleet replacement. And Warren is scheduled right after this presentation to talk about the fleet replacement. We covered the operating costs for fleet that day, but we were still working on a couple of items related to the airport and to the fleet, and so they were just delayed a bit. I also want to, before I get started, I want to thank Jimmy McKnight, who did a lot of the work for this presentation, and also to the rest of the staff in Public Works, and specifically to the airport. There's been a lot of work put into this presentation, and we're hopeful that we've got answers to any questions that you might have. And please interrupt me if you do have questions. Feel free to stop me any point during the presentation. Similar to the other presentations on the budget that I gave a couple of weeks ago, we wanted to cover some general services in each of the sections in Public Works. And so this page just lists a couple of the broad items happening at the airport. We also want to highlight a couple of major accounts and fees that happen at the airport. These are just a couple of them. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. This is a similar summary that we give in Public Works. So this is actually the current fiscal year 22. So you can see a broad representation at the airport, the different categories. One thing that I'll point out, and it's near the top, I'll see if I can, let's see if I can, with the highlighter, and again, I apologize behind you, I'm highlighting just one number. It's the second number down on this page. And we're going to come back and talk just a little bit about that particular number in the upcoming budget, but that represents the transfer from the general fund. And the airport is subsidized by the general fund from time to time. In fact, you can see dating back into 2007 on this slide, the general fund subsidizes the airport, and depending on what action, there's sometimes personnel changes or operation changes at the airport that change that subsidy from the general fund. And again, we're giving this as a little bit of a history dating back to 2007 between the general fund and the airport. One of the things I also want to cover relative to the airport is some significant, again, changes, but budget related. These are not operational changes, but a couple of things that have happened recently. In 2015, we acquired a new ARF truck. In 2018, some snow removal equipment. Staffing changes that date back to actually back to 2011. Some of these changes have happened as recently as 2019, and I can go through some of the details here. I'll also remind the council last year about this time we submitted a supplemental request for a couple of positions at the airport. And if you recall, if you were on the council at the time, there was one other significant occurrence happening at with the budget last year, and there was a discussion about security. And there was a bit of a question during that presentation about what should be happening at the security. And Wayne at the time took a step back with the council and said, give us a little bit of time. We need to go back and talk about security at the airport, what it looks like. And then also these two positions that are talked about in this supplemental right here. And this is actual copy of the supplemental that was submitted last year with the budget. We have completed our review of the security questions, and just a quick summary, the security has been included in the police department budget supplementals to the administration and to the council. Chief Ross has submitted that. I'll cover it just very, very briefly in the next slide. But the airport staff and Public Works are fully supportive of what the police department is recommending to the council. I think it was the top priority for the police department, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it's important for the council to know that Public Works is completely on board with what they're recommending with the police department. The primary thing that is impressive to me is that it's a staff that can grow. It's a mechanism that allows for growth that's going to happen at the airport. And so from a security standpoint, it's important to anticipate growth as well. So a couple of other things that I wanted to cover. And I'll note on this particular slide, it's marked as a draft because there are just a couple of fees that are still being reviewed. Most of the fees have actually been reviewed by a consultant. We went out to an outside consultant to have complete fee review done at the airport. Some of these fees are actually new, and I'm going to go through them with a little bit of detail. So again, you can stop me if you have any questions. We're recommending in the Consolidated Fee Schedule, these are all changes or new fees. Parking, we're recommending going from $8 a day to $10 a day. We're changing landing fees, as indicated here, from 65 cents to 97 cents, per 1,000 pounds. Terminal fees are going from 75 cents to $1.83 per in-plane passenger. We have a new fee, an office space fee that relates to the new terminal, and other city-owned airport space. We're going to $20 per square foot per year. The fuel flowage fee is getting adjusted. Right now it's 8 cents per gallon, and we're adjusting that for air carriers to go to 5 cents. And then all other non-air carriers are going to 8 cents per gallon. A ground lease fee, we're going from 45 to 55 cents per square foot. Hangar rentals, because we have a large number of hangar rentals that vary in fees, we're recommending to the council that each of those fees go up by 25%. We're adding an overnight fee for air carriers at $50 a night. We have a car rental concession that we're changing based on recommendation from the consultant. Right now, we have a $50 fee per stall per month, and we're recommending that change to 10% of gross revenue and then $20 per stall per month. It's probably a little bit more conducive to the car rental businesses that we're anticipating at the airport. And also retail concessions, we're recommending a 5% of gross revenue fee. Related to the upcoming budget, fiscal year 23, some changes. I touched briefly on the security again. Right now, the security is not part of the airport. We're supportive of what the police department is doing, and so that's just noted as a change that is associated with the airport. We're recommending some software increases, again, mostly associated with the new terminal. Utility costs, again, associated with the increased utility fees that we anticipate with the building. Some increases for maintenance and supplies. We're also recommending 4.5 new positions. This includes a division director. We're recommending that the airport go to a division of public works. We're also recommending a maintenance manager and a security manager and a document manager. And I'll show you the organization chart on the next slide. The half a position, you're probably aware, the city's been negotiating with the State Mitigation Commission relative to the Delta Restoration Project. And in that agreement with the Mitigation Commission, we agreed to fund half a position relative to the Delta Restoration Project. And so that's the half a position that's illustrated on that bullet point. We're also recommending some snow removal equipment. We'll touch on that in just a minute here. And we're actually recommending to the administration and to the council that we use an exchange of CARES Act money. So I'm not sure if the council's aware, but in the several federal actions that have happened with CARES Act money, there is money set aside specifically for airports, and the airport is receiving funding specific to the Provo airport. And so we have different funding sources. We actually have 2 or 3 different CARES Act funding sources that can be utilized. One of those funding sources that's coming in this fiscal year would allow us to exchange money with the general fund and actually buy snow removal equipment. And we'll touch on that in just a little bit. So the organization structure that I mentioned before, this is the recommended organization structure. You'll note anything that has an asterisk in it is a new position that we're recommending with the upcoming budget. So with the 2 positions that we had last year in the budget, we had a total of 7 positions. With the 4.5 positions that we're recommending with this upcoming budget, we would have 11.5 positions at the airport. You'll note that the contract employee, the wildlife specialist, is up in the left-hand corner on this page.
We have a question, Mr. Decker. Go ahead, Councilor McKay.
That's fine.
Don't we have a director right now? You had that asterisk as a new one.
So the current organization has an airport manager, and that position has been altered into one of the operations manager. So that's the reason that position is not highlighted. So the division director, it would be a new position.
And this would be a whole new division then. So it wouldn't be under you anymore, so to speak, the airport.
No, it actually would. The airport division would be still part of Public Works. So right now we have 3 divisions. In fact, in the next presentation, you'll actually see an organization chart that shows a little bit where fleet, I mean, it's specific to fleet because it's a fleet presentation, but you'll see an organization chart and you'll actually see the airport in public services. It's currently a section of public services, which is a division of Public Works. So what we're recommending is we make the airport a division of itself in Public Works. So there would end up being 4 divisions in Public Works.
Okay, so putting that airport director position in, I assume that would take some stuff off your plate, correct?
I'm not sure how to answer that.
Yeah.
It depends on what happens at the airport.
Because you manage so many things, I've wondered.
There's things happening. There's things happening at the airport. There's plenty still going on.
Because it's going to grow so much and, okay.
Yep. So I think it's important to note, we do anticipate additional positions in the future coming up. Again, a little bit of a picture on this particular organization chart showing some potential future positions. I think it's important also to note that the organization chart, even though we're starting to create these different sections in the airport, similar to Public Works, across the board, we really don't allow, I'll say it the way we sometimes, talk about it in Public Works. We don't allow silos to be created. Very similar in Public Works. You've got to have people that are willing to move over and help other sections. It's the same way in the airport. Just because you see an operations sections or a security section, that doesn't mean that those operators are not going to cross over and help in those other areas. So it's important to note that even though this is going to be if it's approved by the council and the administration, this is going to be the organization. All of those operators, all of those positions are going to have to work together and cross over. So it's important to note that they're going to help each other. So from a comparison of the current fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 23, this is a good summary of where the airport fits in the budget. So you can see the fiscal year 22, the same slide, that same information that I presented near the beginning of the presentation. But this one also shows fiscal year 23 being added next to it, so you can make that comparison. I'll make a note, again, the second line down that I pointed out is the general fund transfer, and you can see a substantial increase, almost $950,000 of general fund subsidy that has to go to the airport. A lot of that is personnel related, some of it's equipment. But again, given the growth that's happening at the airport and what we're anticipating in the coming year, especially, we knew that this was happening. Last year, the conversation that I mentioned before about security and potential addition of operators, we were fully anticipating that we were going to see a substantial increase this year. So this, I hope that this does not come as a complete surprise to anyone here. So you can see this is the same graph that I showed. The scale has changed a little bit on the left-hand side so that you can see, again, substantial increase that we're anticipating from the general fund. I wanted to cover one other item. Go ahead.
Mr. Shipley.
Sorry, back on the comparison. So are we lumping grants and federal money into the revenues line, or are those real revenues from operations at the airport?
Yeah, these are real revenues from operations. This is So I reviewed that list of revenue changes that we were recommending to the council. So these are revenues coming in plus the general fund transfer. So this is not CIP money coming in from AIP funding or other federal money coming in for CIP projects at the airport.
The federal money isn't operational money. It's just for CIP projects.
Some of it is. So the CARES Act money that I mentioned in that exchange with the general fund, it can be used for operations. Some of it can be, but like AIP money cannot be used or generally is not used for operations.
And of course, this general fund transfer doesn't include the $500,000 we transfer each year for the loan, the interfund loan that happened for the real estate as well.
It does not. This is just operations.
Over and above. Yep. Okay, thanks.
Councilor McKay has a question.
And do the revenues account for the increased prices that we looked at earlier?
Yeah, you can see, if you look at the very top line on this chart, you can see the revenues coming in, and there's almost $1 million increase that's anticipated. And so that's part of those fees that I was talking about. So let me cover one other topic, a little bit of a shift. It's still budget related, but I anticipate the council and others may have questions about the airport terminal funding. So this is a slide that represents the sources of the funding. And you can see there was 5 major sources, the FAA, state of Utah, MAG, county, and then city contribution that came from primarily utilities that were extended to the airport. And you can see the total dollar amount. Just a reminder that I know the council has seen this before, but this is the construction, kind of a plan view of the overall construction area of the new terminal. So we really broke this into 3 different areas, and I'll try to highlight these. Again, I apologize for pointing on the screen behind you, but this really accounts for the apron and the de-icing pad that's right here. That's one project. The terminal itself, the building that's kind of in the center of the rendering right here, and then the loop road and the parking lot is the third project. So when you see this slide right here, I tried to break down, what you're looking at so that you kind of understand where those expenses went. So overall design and construction management costs you can see on the top, and then those 3 project areas are broken down: the apron, the de-ice pad, the terminal, the parking lot, and you can see what was expended in each of those different 3 areas. Any questions on that element? Just to finish up the presentation, 5-year CIP, and I think there was a question about CIP. So this is more directed to Mr. Shipley's question. So this is FAA money. These are CIP projects that are subject to grants coming in from a variety of different funding sources. But you can see we have 3 primary CIP projects that we're planning. The taxiway, we are looking at a building, a snow removal building, and we'll need to come back to the council and talk about some details and using some CARES Act money to do that, and then also some tower equipment and the actual equipment, the snow removal equipment itself. Unfunded CIP, just like every other public works section and division, we have some unfunded projects. Again, we're looking for conversations with FAA to finish some of these projects, or at least have a conversation about funding the projects. So there are 2 projects that remain on that list, and we'll follow up with some additional conversations with FAA this year. A couple of things that I think are important to note. Next steps, the way the staff has provided some information as far as next steps. You need to know some of these are already underway. Piping the moat that's near the parking at the new terminal, we're already underway piping that area. We're getting some indication that parking may need to expand fairly quickly, fairly soon, and so you can see that on the list. The Delta restoration I talked about before. Hiring the part-time position will help us stay involved. We're already heavily involved in that. But we anticipate some specific direction from that individual. Future staffing is a conversation that's ongoing. Hangar expansion, we get lots of requests for hangar expansion, particularly in the northeast corner of the airport, but there's hangar expansion in several areas. One of the things that hangs that up, that slows hangar expansion capability, is utility extensions into the airport in a variety of locations. And so we'll need to look at that capability. Master plan updates are another area where we feel like, particularly with the new terminal, we need to update the master plan and include not only the fenced area, but the area outside of the fence in some kind of a master plan, understanding what potential, not just zoning, but actual buildings that may come associated with the airport. Obviously, some maintenance of documentation and certification manuals need to continue, along with training. And then also a conversation that the council just needs to know. We're hearing conversations about potential expansion, and we need to be prepared for that kind of a conversation. I don't anticipate anything immediate, but I think it's important to know that the council to know that the staff is preparing next steps. Is not just about this year, then, the next year after that. We're looking 5-10 years down the road, and that conversation has started. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I think that's the end of the presentation.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Decker? I don't know if Mr. Fillmore wants to add anything as a member. You're correct. Am I correct remembering you're on the airport board?
That is correct, Mr. Hanley, and I have had several sessions with Mr. Decker and his people to try to come up to speed on things, but I don't have need of asking a question at this point.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Decker.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will now turn to item number 7, which is a presentation regarding the fiscal year 2023 budget vehicle fleet, including vehicle replacement. And this will be presented by Warren Merritt, Public Works Fleet Manager. Thank you. And Jimmy Knight, looks like.
You can't forget him. He's important. Thank you very much for working us into your schedule. I do appreciate that. We are here to discuss the new vehicle budget for fiscal year 23. Who has that? Oh, I do. I'll learn every day, right? This slide is just a brief overview to give you at a glance how many different departments there are under the umbrella of Public Works. Each one of those departments have vehicles as well as specialized equipment that are inside the Provo City fleet. When it comes time to large decisions within the Provo City fleet, we have organized what we call our Fleet Advisory Committee. It is made up of representatives from the various departments as you see there on the screen. It is not just a general fund, but it is also made up of the internal and enterprise funds as well. The roles of our committee are to get together on a regular basis and to discuss the needs of the fleet as a whole and also as individual departments. We evaluate things such as the age, mileage, cost of operation of different vehicles, their general overall condition, and we do our best to forecast a 5-year plan for our fleet needs as far as replacement goes. We also use best practices. There was a study done by Mercury and Associates in which they did a very large study nationwide for different utilization techniques that help us determine the correct fleet size. Are we too big? Are we too small? The vehicle and equipment replacement cycle, their life cycle, how long they benefit us the most before they start costing us too much money to make it worth holding on to them. Again, the life cycle is based off of the mileage and the hours of the vehicle, the age, and the type of duty cycle. Duty cycle is important. As an example, I have up there a Ford Explorer that is made up for a police interceptor. This duty cycle of a police interceptor is going to be much heavier, much more extreme. Therefore, its life cycle is going to be much shorter than an Explorer that is made for administrative purposes. running errands here and there. These are things that we take into consideration. There are many vehicles inside of our fleet that we take this into consideration for. This is just an example that I am using for the purpose today. Using this data, our Fleet Advisory Committee, we are able to evaluate their individual department needs. And as I said before, we can usually forecast out about 5 years of what it is that our fleet is going to need so that we can hopefully avoid any kind of surprises. Like many other departments, fleet has not been immune to the challenges of today's economy. Advances in technology is a wonderful thing, but it's a little bit of a double-edged sword when it comes to this. These advances are going to help us become more of a green fleet. We can get more electric vehicles into our fleet and show that Provo City does in fact care. And this is fantastic. However, the other side of the coin is that advance in technology costs extra money. And as an example, because of the additional costs in technology, we have seen a 4 to all the way up to a 12% increase in inflation just this year. And we are expecting the same thing for fiscal year 24 and on and on. Yes.
I was just wondering, with our gas prices going up dramatically, does that change how much the increased cost is for the electric ones?
The increase in the cost is offset by the eventual savings in the fuel. Yes, it is not immediate. It does take approximately, and this depends greatly on what the vehicle is purchased for, how much it is used. So there is no straight answer. In 5 years, it will have taken care of its additional cost. But in general, from the research that I have done in most fleet settings, it can take anywhere from 5 to 7 years before it has offset that cost. Working against it, offsetting that cost, is it still costs money to charge it. So it's not necessarily it doesn't cost us anything to run it. It does. It is less than gasoline. And I'm excited to move in this direction. It's going to be great. But it's going to take a little bit of time for us to be able to move in that direction, because as you can see, a couple examples, the F-150 is one of the most common vehicles we have in our fleet. Very universal. You see them all over the roads. To go from a standard F-150 gas engine and make it a hybrid, it's going to cost you an additional $7,700 to get that one vehicle, which clearly, obviously, increases the budget. To make that F-150 from a gas burning vehicle to fully electric, it increases it to $11,000, almost $12,000. These are some of the challenges that we're facing. We want to go green, but we have to consider the additional costs in doing so. Another delay that we are having, another challenge, that we are having is, again, the automotive industry is not being left alone when it comes to the delays in everything that we are trying to accomplish. We have seen delays for a regular truck of almost a year from the time that I've ordered it. We still don't have it in the fleet yet. In fact, up until last week, I didn't even have a date that they could give me for when it would be built. So it is taking us a very long time to get any of our vehicles, whereas in the past, it was a few months. Because of this, we are having to hold on to our older vehicles longer because we don't have the replacement yet, which means that we have higher costs in repairs and maintenance to keep these vehicles on the road that have fulfilled their life cycle. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Councilor Whipple's question. I mean, I would appreciate getting some sense of the estimate of cost, not just in terms of the price tag, but in terms of the savings, because it does seem to me that gas prices have gone up exorbitantly, very, very quickly. And so the cost difference may be changing almost weekly. Whereas this only reflects the sticker price.
Correct.
And the other thing is that the electric and hybrid vehicles will tend to wear down less quickly than the other vehicles. So there's maybe some advantage to having those into the fleet sooner, especially if we're in delay situations. And I don't know what the delay difference would be between a regular and a hybrid or a vehicle electric at this point either. But
Most of the delays, just to answer that question, most of the delays are due to the semiconductors, both of which hybrid, non-hybrid, electric, they all
So it's
take
the
it.
same for both.
It
Yeah.
is, unfortunately, yes. To go back to your first question, you are correct. It does fluctuate with the gas prices as soon, how long will it take to offset the cost? But unfortunately, I mean, I can come back and I'd be more than happy to keep you up to date on how that changes. But I kind of had to take a generalized number
Right.
within like the last 6 months, roughly before they went up. Now currently what they're at. There are so many different factors that I've come across when researching this topic to try and get a plan in place to implement these electric vehicles. And by doing my research, I realized there is a lot more in place than just what kind of maintenance savings do you have? What kind of gas savings do you have? There are many costs associated with both kinds of vehicles.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I just think the general principle is that if the price of gas is going up, then this makes electric and or hybrid more desirable sooner than later.
It does.
And of course, the main reason we requested this of our fleets is as a council is for air quality. So we appreciate any effort you can make to make that transition for that reason most of all.
Absolutely. I think we all are in agreement that we're all united in the same goal. Absolutely. I just came back from a conference regarding very much electric vehicles, trying to educate myself more, as well as what it is that we're going to need to do for our infrastructure to be able to make this happen.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You're very welcome. Thank you. Okay. Just to give you a general update on our current fleet, we have 2 electric vehicles right now. One is found in development services. One is found in our energy department. And with our police department, we have 20 hybrids with the hopes of adding 17 more to this year's budget. The hybrids are available in a police package, which makes it very convenient for us, especially since police vehicles see so much idle time. It is a great option to go to. And we have had a great deal of success in the last 2 years purchasing these hybrids. So that is very good news. In regards to the electric vehicles, one of the things that I was made aware of is when it comes to implementing electric vehicles into a fleet, there is a large amount of information, meetings with our energy department, for example. It is not as simple as we have 20 electric charging stations right now, which is 40 charging abilities. We have to strategically place them in certain areas, but we also have to communicate with our energy department to find out if we have enough power in that location not to cause grid issues. Of course, we're not going to just add 20 electric vehicles at once, but as we move through this, it is something that needs to be taken into consideration at the same time on an ongoing basis. Back to the 5-year plan that our vehicle committee was able to come up with. This is what we have so far. This is what we are forecasting. This year, we need 45 vehicles to replace out of our fleet. And then you can see for yourself from the graph as it goes down from there. Would anybody like more time to look at that?
So I just have a question. I noticed the police doesn't change, but is that assuming the officer force remains the same number? I mean, if we increase that by 1 to 4 a year, doesn't that raise
the police department is a little tricky when it comes to forecasting for this reason. We have done some calculations last year to figure out how many new vehicles the police department is going to need to replace old vehicles to get their fleet healthy. A healthy fleet means you're not keeping it in service longer than its useful life. Right now, they are behind. If we average 20 vehicles a year, we will be able to get them healthy within about 5 to 7 years. It does not take into consideration additional officers because we are not sure what that projection is. Do they receive 1 a year? Do they receive 5 a year? We are unsure as to that number at this time.
But presumably that number would go up exactly corresponding to the number of new officers?
I would assume so. However, and I will be the first to admit, I am not 100% sure how this works. I've been told that when an officer has been granted, an additional officer has been granted, that the funding for that vehicle does not come from the new vehicle replacement. Is that correct? Okay, he will address that in here in just a moment. So
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Jimmy if there's any questions now, before, or after.
Okay.
Thank you.
I see no questions at this time. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so as Warren mentioned, so this, the numbers here represent only replacements of the current fleet. When we were made aware, we work with the finance department closely on the fleet advisory committee and as public works in general. So when we're made aware of a police officer being added in the budget, we work with them to make sure that the cost is added. But right now, that's not reflected here. That's just replacements of existing vehicles. So the way the fleet replacement works is the fleet replacement fund is its own fund that where we purchase all the vehicles for the whole city, and then the respective departments that receive those vehicles pay the vehicle replacement fund back. In some cases, like in the general fund, it's done through a loan payment program, so we're able to purchase the vehicles outright with the vehicle replacement funds, and then charge a loan amount to the general fund. So my purpose in standing up to explain this chart is to show not only at the top, the total project costs, projects by department, or just the vehicles that will be paid by the vehicle replacement fund, but also the lighter gray lines below show the payments. So in FY23, we're buying $3.2 million of vehicles for the general fund. And the loan payments below that also are pretty close, 3.3, represents old loans as well as the new loans. So it's typically a 5-year loan. So the loan payment represents previous 4 years plus the first year of the new loan. So the next line shows the FY22 funding level, which was 2.86. And then the bottom line shows the difference between the future years and the current fiscal year funding levels so that you know the impact to the base budget for the future years. So the next slide will show that in FY23, the 422 at the bottom of this chart is what the fleet replacement committee or the Fleet Advisory Committee is requesting be added to the general fund base budget to cover the new loan amount that is above the 22 base budget. We also wanted to point out in 24 and 25, by going from, FY24 shows 739,000. That's again compared to the FY22 level. So if we're able to get FY23 level up to 3.28, then the 24 budget would need to increase by 300,000 more than that, and so on in 25. So, and then like Warren mentioned, that those costs don't factor in additional costs of adding in more electric and hybrid vehicles. So I think at this point, the numbers by department show that all of the police patrol vehicles would be hybrids under this scenario, but additional hybrids and electric vehicles would be an additional cost. One other item, we had a question from an earlier presentation, an earlier one that Dave did. We were asked about the impact of the rising fuel costs on the overall city budget. So in the FY23 budget, we're currently forecasting the city price for gasoline, which obviously is without taxes. We're forecasting unleaded at $4 a gallon and diesel at $4.50. We go back and look at the last few years of usage by department and are able to forecast based on those prices the impact of the budget, which we anticipate to be about $640,000, a $640,000 increase to citywide fuel budgets at those prices. So we wanted to let you know what price we're forecasting on so that, as the year continues and we find out what it's really going to be, if we have to come back for more or we're able to have savings, you'll know it's based on, we're forecasting the best we can. So, and that's the end of the presentation. If there's any other questions for me or Warren.
Counselor Whipple.
So the fuel budget is separate from the fleet budget. Is
Yes,
that
so
right?
each department has their own fuel budget. The fleet department pays the citywide gas bill and then charges out the appropriate number of gallons to each department.
Okay. And is that similar with the maintenance? Like each
Yes.
department will pay for the maintenance of its own vehicles within the fleet?
Correct.
So when you're coming to us on budget, you're more concerned about the initial cost of buying those vehicles than you are about the operating costs because those are in the different departments.
Well, we're concerned, and
You care about that also.
our responsibility is more on the purchase, yes, but and Public Works is a big consumer of vehicles as well, so it's definitely in mind.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the different areas where you need vehicles, it seems like parking enforcement would be a perfect one to be an all electric vehicle, right? Because it's just creeping slowly through lots of things. So are you looking at the potential usage when you're considering what kind of vehicle to get?
Yes, we are definitely looking at what kind of a vehicle would be great as an electric vehicle. For example, some engineering vehicles where they go to this location to do inspections, and then they come back to the office. That would be ideal. You mentioned parking enforcement, and ironically, the electric vehicle that is currently in development services was with parking enforcement because we thought the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, it was not working. They were not able to keep it charged. They had because obviously it's not a hybrid. It doesn't do regenerative braking as you go through and drive the vehicle. It has to be plugged in at all times. I am still weeding out what it was with Sandy Bucio as far as what it was that was making it so it wasn't working for their department. So I do not have all the answers for you yet, and it doesn't mean that we can't revisit and give them some electric vehicles in the future as we purchase more of them, because we were under the same thinking as you.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, have you considered any non-car options like bikes or electric bikes or things like that for different applications?
We have looked into different, I don't want to say upstart companies, but for example, it's not a golf cart, but it's similar to a golf cart, motorized. Again, that's not exactly ideal because it's not electric. Smaller vehicles, smaller burning fuel for parking enforcement to go out onto Main Street, smaller vehicles for less of a target to hit safety wise. As far as looking into bicycles or scooters, I have not looked into that, no. But it is certainly something that has piqued my interest.
Okay.
So.
Counselor McKay.
I'm just curious, have we looked into leasing as opposed to buying the vehicles?
Leasing is something that I actually have an appointment with next week to talk to them about leasing. There are some things that I need to understand when it comes to leasing. There are some things I'd like to ask them as far as our police vehicles. We spend a large amount of money with every vehicle getting it upfitted and ready for the road. If we're turning that vehicle in every 3 years and I have to re-upfit, that's a lot of additional money. However, I'm sure I can get my answers when I speak to them next week during my appointment. So yes, leasing is definitely on the board and being looked at heavily.
Okay, cool. One more question. I know we have our own car repair place.
Yes.
We do our own work. What about the new cars when they're under warranty for a couple of years or whatever? Do we utilize the warranty or do we still fix them ourselves?
Oh no, we use the warranty.
Okay.
If it is under warranty, it definitely goes back to the manufacturer. We do not repair it ourselves. We want to keep the warranty and not void it by doing our own work. And there's no point in us charging different departments for work that they shouldn't be charged for.
I've got a question, just going back to this fuel budget thing and making sure I understand this correctly. So that $640,000 is the increase from previous fuel prices to now. Or what, estimated at the $4. Okay. So and maybe this was addressed implicitly in a lot of things that have been said, but is that not a good ballpark number to use for justification of purchasing new electric or hybrid vehicles? So in other words, if there's a $7,000 or $11,000 price tag difference, you're offset by that fuel increase in some ways, right? I mean, I'm not suggesting using all of it. You could buy 60 electric vehicles and I might die happy, and that might make up the difference of $640,000, but that doesn't necessarily, I mean, there's also an infrastructure problem that Travis Ball is going to solve for us, but does that, is there a modest window here that gives us some flexibility?
There is some flexibility, yes. I did a brief study on our vehicles, 14 patrol vehicles that are hybrid versus 14 patrol vehicles that are non-hybrid over a 8-month period. How much fuel did each one consume? The non-hybrids consumed about 2,700 gallons more, and we had a savings roughly of about $9,000. So yes, absolutely. But I don't believe it is as much as we think it is. However, as gas prices go up, that number will increase. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Ball, I don't know if you came in just after you were alluded to. Do you anticipate having, this sounds like a longer conversation needs to happen, but I'm just curious what your initial reaction is to the idea of, would we have infrastructure challenges if we increased our electric vehicles significantly in the fleet? Like how much of adjustment?
Talking about hybrids or plug-in hybrids?
Yeah.
Plug-in hybrids are just straight electrical.
Right.
I think if you went straight electrical, we'd have issues. We've installed over 35 new charging stations around the city. The issue is, how do you charge those vehicles? We're using the type 1, type 2 chargers, which are low voltage, 120 volts up to 208, 240 type 2. And those are slow chargers. Where electrical utilities will have a problem is once they get into Tesla fast charging capability, where you have 45 kW to 90 kW demands. And those things we will not be able to handle in residential areas. Those will have to be installed in commercial areas where you have big transformation and a lot more electrical wire capacity.
And for city fleet, you would presumably need those charging stations at the city center or wherever the cars are parked.
And if you have charging stations if you just have plug-ins, and I think like at our facility, we put plugs by every one of our parking stations, and you can use those overnight. That wouldn't cause any type of electrical problem. It's just when you get into like the Tesla chargers. If you're using a 240 volt, 208, 240 volt charging, it wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, thanks. Well, we'll look forward to finding out more about how that if there are infrastructure needs that need to be addressed, we'd be interested in helping. All right, any other questions? Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. We are at our break, so we'll take a 10-minute break and return at 1:40.
Chair, can we take a little longer break? Our screen is blurring out. We're going to have IT come up and fix it.
So
About
how much
20-minute
longer?
break.
20 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll come back at 1:50. What's that?
Recording stopped.
I thought it was my guys. I'm like, what?
Recording in progress.
There's the magic words. Okay, thank you so much for returning after a break. We have been supplied with chocolate from the mayor's office, so we are going to be very perky and attentive. I also got my Coke Zero during the break, so double reason. We will now begin with item number 8, which is a presentation regarding fiscal year 2023 budget from our Energy Department. Travis Ball, Energy Director, will be presenting, and we have 35 minutes for this item.
Thank you, Council. I appreciate this opportunity to present our budget. I'm glad you got chocolate and caffeine. I am an electrical engineer, so, take that into effect. You might need something to keep you awake. Kat will tell you. Sometimes I get going engineering wise and it's not a good thing. Anyway, I appreciate this opportunity and thank you, Mayor and the administration for this opportunity. First off, I have several visitors here that really help keep the Energy Department running. Over here, I have Kat Linford, who is our Key Accounts Manager / Public Information Officer, Scott Bunker, who is our the Assistant Director, Brett Davis, who is the Assistant Transmission Distribution Manager. Behind him, we have Tad Smolcombe, who is our Systems Electrical Engineer, Systems Operations Manager. And in addition to our staff, we have 2 members of the Energy Board. Our chair, Ned Hill, is here, and also a member of our board, Gary Winterton. We appreciate them coming for this presentation. Like I say, I'm excited to talk a little bit about the Energy Department. I believe it's a very vital portion or department in the city, and it's something that I love to be the director of. First off, I've said this for the last 8 years when we've done this presentation. We have a big, hairy, audacious goal to be the most reliable energy department in the United States while providing a safe environment for our employees. That is our BHAG. But in addition to our BHAG, we spent a considerable amount of time in 2020 creating a strategic plan. And I'll start off with that just to tell you what we base our budget on. Every year we look at our strategic plan and then we try to base the money on that, on not only reliability, but also providing other services for the citizens of Provo. After that, we'll talk about reliability because that is a very important part of our department. And then some of the value-added services that the Energy Department provides to the city. And finally, we'll end up with the budget. First off, our vision statement is Provo Power shall be at the forefront of providing reliable energy services, enhancing the quality of our life for our community. And our mission statement is we provide reliable energy services through investing in employees, infrastructure, and community outreach. We are proactive in adapting to environmental and technological changes while maintaining our fiscal responsibility to the citizens of Provo. And with that vision and mission statement, we look at these other categories that we try to make sure that we include: customer care, financial stability, valued workforce, community resource safety. And I look at these managers behind me, and each one of them plays a key role in each one of these areas. I look at Brett, and he makes sure that we are a very safe and well trained department. Customer care. If you've been on our Facebook page and seen when we've had outages, Kat's up at all hours of the night talking about when we believe the power will be restored and letting the citizens know what to expect. But each one of these areas, we have somebody that keys in on, and we have a budget for those items. Now, one thing that Cliff sent out before he left was some questions, and you can read these things. I'll just say that we appreciate the support that the council has given us, and the administration gives us. We have enough funds to provide a reliable service, and we have not had to submit any supplemental requests. So we're very well taken care of, and that's because of the council and the administration. We really appreciate that. First, on reliability, we have a very aggressive capital improvement plan budget. I picked this up because this was created back in 2005. So we normally plan out for 20 years. So I looked at this I was involved in putting this plan together, and we followed that plan for the last 20 years. For instance, the last 10 years, we've invested over $60 million in our capital projects. Just to kind of put it in perspective, if we did those same projects now and we waited instead of doing them this last 10 years, it would have been well over $100 million for those projects, just because of the cost of materials. And I'm sure you've heard about all the increases that we've had to do. So I'd like to say we were on top of it in a way. And if you look at our system, we've updated several of our substations. We built a new substation down in the south portion of Provo in the Mountain Vista area. We've upgraded a substation over by BYU on 9th East. We've upgraded a substation over by the freeway. We've built new transmission lines, and we've updated a lot of our distribution lines. I could say that any apparatus in the city, if it failed at this point, we have capacity in an adjacent transformer, an adjacent distribution line to pick those customers up. And so as in engineering speak, we have a true N-1 system right now. And it's in the best condition I've seen since I've been here. And so I think we've done a great job in making capital improvements to our system. This is our capital improvement plan for the next 5 years. You'll see this year we have a $9 million budget. I'll talk about that when we get to our budget, but we probably won't spend that much money just because we can't spend that. If we order a transformer today, it'll arrive in about 3 years. That's just how long the supply chain issues are causing us. Meters are out. We normally could get them between 4 and 8 weeks. We're looking at 9 months to get meters. The good thing is, a year ago, we decided to stock up on some of our items, transformers, meters, wire. We went out and pre-ordered a lot of things that we thought might have an issue. And we've been ahead of the curve that way. And so we have several cities calling us to get meters, some of the items. And we have, we give them the things that we have taken out of the system, but we're keeping the items that we've ordered for us. Some of the big projects that we're doing in the future is Gillespie Substation. That's one right at the mouth of the canyon as you go around up towards Heber City. There's a substation up on the hill. That was built in about 1965. So we're updating that substation, but that's one where we'll start the engineering, start the work, and we'll receive the transformer in about 2.5 to 3 years. We've been working on distribution automation so that we can isolate and make sure that when we do have outages, it's only for a small amount of customers, not for a full circuit. And finally, we've been working, and this year we'll complete a second feed into the new airport and also into Duckett Aviation, which will give us some redundancy down there at the airport. Every month, we have key performance indicators that we review with our energy board, and they make sure that our indices, our reliability indices are up to snuff. So we are in the top 25% of the country in reliability, and we want to be the best in that, but we review that on a monthly basis. We also compare where we are financially to other utilities and make sure that we are in good shape. For instance, one thing, utilities have an average of 400 employees, or 1 employee for 400 customers. And that would make our utility we have about 40,000 customers. So we would need about 100 employees. Well, we've done a great job of cutting some of that. In the last 15 years, we did have about 100 employees. Now we have about 67 employees. So we've cut significantly. That's one way we've been able to keep some of our costs low, but we've also been able to keep up the works. Some of those things like 10 meter readers, we installed an AMI system. So we get meter reads every 30 minutes basically. And so we were able to cut 10 personnel, but the public gets they can find out every hour what their energy usage is. We don't have to send someone out and into backyards every month to get meter reads. So that's kind of what we've done for reliability and some of the services. Now we'll talk about some of the other services that we provide as the energy department. Part of that is conservation, sustainability. We've had great leadership on the council, Councilman Handley, and we have great leaders on our energy board that have helped us become more sustainable over the last few years. And Ned Hill's been a great advocate for that. We'll talk about some of the rebates that we're offering to try to help people get rid of some of their gas engines and clean up the air in Utah County. Street lights, city trees, and then we'll talk about some of the transfers we make to the general fund. First off, we wanted to be an example as a building. So when we built our building, we decided to be LEED Gold, and our building's been very energy efficient. We installed some solar as part of that. It's a good opportunity. I bring in groups constantly to teach them about solar and some of the other resources that we have, and it's good to look out of our building and see those solar panels. We'll also talk about energy efficiency, because that's one way that we can also be sustainable is by installing energy efficient bulbs and be more efficient with the electricity we use. We have had a hybrid, and I heard you talk about that in the last presentation. We've had that for at least 4 years. We've installed several charging stations around the city so people can use a plug-in hybrid. I've had one since 2016 and love my plug-in hybrid. And then the biggest change we've made over the last year is the solar that has come online in Spanish Fork and down by Mona. 84 megawatts of solar, which is a significant amount. The solar plant down by Mona is 540 acres of solar that follows the sun from the east to the west. So it's over 30%, has an over 30% capacity factor. Compared to a rooftop, it's about 15%. So you get double the amount of energy out of that 80 megawatts. This is how we've changed over the last 3 years. If you look at our resource mix in 2020, you'll see that we had a lot of market purchases. We had coal, which is at 45%, natural gas, or we use our own natural gas, but we offloaded a lot of that to other utilities, 5%. This year, you can see the biggest increase is solar. It went up to 15% of our energy comes from solar now, from those two resources. So that's a big chunk. The one thing that has decreased, which is a little bit alarming, is the hydro, right? And probably understand why our hydro has decreased, because of we're not getting rain. And so we need rain. I would say pray for that. The other thing that we did is—
Can I ask a quick question? The natural gas increase, is that due to the BYU?
Part of it, a significant portion, because 15 megawatts that's running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
That's a big portion of that natural gas. The other portion is we've brought back all of our resource from West Valley, and we'll use that West Valley resource to make up a big chunk of our next year's resource. Just because we've lost hydro, we've lost 5% of hydro, and we need to make that up. But it's another thing. I talked about how we did a good job in doing our capital improvements. We bought solar at the bottom of the market. We bought solar panels when they were 30 cents per watt, and now they're up above 50 cents. Yeah, I mean, we made some really good decisions, and we knew we were going to buy solar, so we bought that plant in West Valley, which is a 200 megawatt natural gas plant that we could follow when the solar goes offline. We can start those engines up to cover the energy needs for the citizens, which is it's a really good plus for the city. Right now, people are looking for energy, and we have enough that we'll be able to make a profit by selling off this year. Oops. The one thing that when we did our solar plant, we had renewable energy credits associated with that solar in Mona. We've sold some of those solar RECs, and that's what's used to fund our green exchange program. So the money here, we spent over $210,000 last year, and it was from selling those RECs. So we're encouraging people to stop using their lawnmowers, their small equipment that creates a lot of PM 2.5 pollution, and instead utilize a battery powered lawnmower. And we've had a lot of people that have loved this program. And in addition, this year, we are going to offer $500 to $1,000 for people to want to install heat pumps. So it's an incentive to take out your HVAC and put in a all electric heat pump, which also, since you're not burning gas, you're not emitting that pollution in this Utah County area. In addition, we're giving customers the opportunity to buy shared solar. So instead of going and put on your roof, it's a more economical way to buy your own solar. You can buy your own out of Spanish Fork. And so far in the last 2 months, we've had 44 customers buy solar in 130 blocks. And we encourage others, if they're looking at solar, to look at this as an option. I think it's a great opportunity for the citizens of Provo to get involved in buying their own shared solar. One thing I didn't put on my slides is the last 2 months, we've also installed 2 different rates, right? We have a time of use rate that you passed and an electric vehicle time of use rate. And so we're encouraging citizens to go look at those. If they have an electric vehicle, they can charge at night at 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour. You just have to, during the peak, you have to not use as much energy. So, but that's another way that we're incentivizing plug-in hybrids or plug-ins so that they can do that at night when the energy prices are low. Another added value service is the street lights that we maintain throughout Provo. You don't see that cost. It's absorbed by the energy department. If you lived in Orem, you'd see a $3 per customer charge for the street lights. Every customer in Orem pays for those lights. In Provo, that's one reason why we were started as a department, is because they wanted light in the city. And that's one thing that we've always tried to do, is provide the citizens light for safety and so forth. Our tree program is one of the best in the state. People look to our street program because we have a great utility forestry program. Scott started this probably 30 years, 28, 29 years ago, and has been very instrumental in building this up. And Chaz Addis is the city forester that does a great job today. We maintain 55,000 trees. And what makes Provo great, I believe, is the trees that are in the city. Just the 15,000 street trees that we maintain, and we plant trees in the parking strips, is enough to take off, what is it, 20 or 1,300 cars. That's how much carbon dioxide that sequesters, is the street trees in Provo. We have transfers to the general fund. This year, we're looking at 11% transfers over $7.5 million, and then we transfer another 6.5 in transfers and chargebacks. So it's about $14 million that we transfer. It's about 20% of our budget to the general fund, which helps fund police, fire, and some of the other administration, some of the other funds in the city. In addition, we've had interfund loans that we've helped departments, so they haven't had to go out and either bond or get loans. We've been able to help. Then I believe that's another way that we've kept costs low in the city. Finally, we're back to the budget now, what we're here for, right? So we'll look at some of the rates that we've looked at, revenues and expenditures. The one thing that I started to talk about is we've had a significant increase. We haven't raised our rates since 2016. And since 2016, we've had a lot of pressure on some of our costs, whether it's equipment, materials, and it's something that we've talked to the Energy Board about. And I'd like to just invite Ned Hill up so he can give you a recommendation from the Energy Board. Ned, you come up. This is one thing that we've been concerned about for the last few years. And this is something that the Energy Board's been very instrumental in discussion. So, Ned.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to us. I've had the privilege over the last 50 years of being on many boards of directors. I must say, I don't know of an organization that is managed better than the energy department in Provo. Travis is just a very unassuming person and just very kind and gentle, but he manages a great department. And I am always very impressed with the results that we're getting and the forward thinking we're getting. Most utilities are scrambling around, trying to find transformers, trying to find ladder trucks, trying to find anything. And this man and his crew are forward thinking enough to stockpile some of those, and they have those ready to go, because our number one part of our strategic plan is to be reliable. And you can't be reliable if you don't have things ready to go when things break down, when you have a transformer blow, and wires fall down and things like that. So Travis has done a great job of that. And I'm amazed when I came on the board that we hadn't raised rates. In fact, we haven't raised rates for 6 years now, right? 6 years, and yet we've still kept up with price increases and equipment increases, all kinds of increases. So as the Energy Board went over this in great detail in our last board meeting, we had a unanimous vote that this was something we ought to do. We didn't want to do too much, but we thought a 1% increase would be sufficient to keep us in the game, at least for now. I've attended a couple of the national board meetings of what's it called, the APPA, where you have all the utilities that are owned by municipalities get together and talk about things. And I've been several times to hear speakers talk about you've got to raise rates constantly, because if you don't raise rates for several years, then that means that you are benefiting unfairly the current people, and then the ones later on will be hit with a lot of the expenses and stuff. So I've been pushing for raising rates just very gently as we go forward to try to keep up and try to keep our goals in reality, providing the best service that we possibly can. So we had a vote at our last board meeting after an energetic discussion. We voted unanimously to suggest a very modest increase for this year to try to keep up with some of the costs that we know are going to be increased, the cost of power and cost of equipment and things like that. So we voted unanimously, and that was our recommendation. Don't we say anything more about it?
No, that's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it. I will say, I mean, the staff, this is all staff related, being prepared. So there is the board recommended a 2% increase. Excuse me. Sorry, what does that mean? So let me show you what that means. A 2% increase is $2 a month for a residential customer. And then for a commercial customer, that's a 0.00007 cent raise on the energy and a 0.14 cent. Thank you.
We know it gets kind of emotional when you're talking about rate increases.
It really does. I mean, it really does. And the fact that, you have, the one thing that we always hear is you have people out there on a fixed income and people who are retired, and you have to really be concerned about those things. So we take that seriously. And then you see the large commercial is a 0.73 cent increase on the demand. And then the industrial is a 2% across the board. So as Ned said, we were wanting a very modest increase because we don't want to get to the point where we have to increase 25% over a period. We did a cost of service study, and that was the recommendation, to do very small increases for the next 3 years. And that's kind of where we're recommending today. This is a too early comparison, but I know this is what you'll be interested in. We believe that there will be other utilities that raise rates, but we compared against the old rates. This is where we will be if we increase rates, about in the middle. We believe other utilities will also have rate increases this year, and we'll update this as they come through. Even then, our commercial industrial rates are towards the bottom. That residential rate is within a few dollars. So we're right where we should be, basically, even with a 2% increase. Finally, the revenue with that increase, we project it to be about $74 million. And how are we going to spend that $74 million? I want to invite Kat and Scott up to kind of do a little demonstration on how our budget is set up, since it's got a few more minutes. And then I'll show you how that is in dollars. So we didn't know you were going to get candy. We thought you might need some. So we are going to give you all of this at the end of this. So I don't know whether that's to sweeten you up or to just as a demonstration.
We're not worried about having too much candy.
Well, I think you'll need it.
Okay.
I just want to show you this first. What they're putting in is the cost for our power. So on my budget, and that's why there's several different candies, because we want a resources that are diverse, right? You want all kinds of resources. Of my budget, that's what it cost me.
Can you do that to an actual budget? You can.
That's it. We want to make sure it's as small as possible.
Right.
Yep. The next portion, this is how much money most cities will transfer to the general fund. It's about 6%. That's how much of the budget will go. But we do more than that here because we want to be better. So we do another 9% to the general fund. And that's how much it takes up of the budget. Okay. And then not only that 11% of the transfers, we have a chargeback. So we want to pay for administration that. Okay. So now look, that's all, there's not very, that's just what we transfer. That's part of the budget, transfers and our power costs. And then we have another item that we don't have a lot of control over because we have to pay our employees. This is our employee cost. And that's another 12%. And then what do we have? This is kind of our, what we have power over, the rest of the money there, 5% of our budget. The blue area is what we control. And so all of our managers make up that extra right there. That's what it is.
All right. Sweet, so to speak.
So how does that go? You can look and see our power costs, 46 million, personnel is 8.5 million. That our operation budget is $3.5 million. That's what we have control over. And that's what we will fight over in our operations. Transfer and chargebacks is the rest of the 20%. So if you look at that, last year we budgeted a deficit in our O&M. This doesn't include our CIP. We are coming in about $2.5 million this year or over budget, I should say. So we're in the red, $2.5 million so far. By the end of the year, we'll be down about $3 million. This year, with the rate increase, we're budgeting because some of our other costs have decreased. Look, we've decreased our expenditure budget by $1.5 million this year. With the rate increase, we're budgeting a $1.4 million surplus in the O&M, but that doesn't include our CIP budget, right? So once you look at our CIP budget, we're still looking at budgeting about a $5.3 million deficit this year. But as we know, a lot of that, we won't spend a lot of that money. We believe that we'll be about even this year. We won't go down in funds if we do get the 2%, but we'll stay about even for this next fiscal year. That's our budget presentation. Do you guys have questions on that?
Mr. Shipley.
So can you speak just briefly to how the bond rating agencies look at the power to be able to increase rates?
Yes, I can. Thank you. That's a great question. This year, every year, we have to go out for the bond agencies, S&P and Fitch, and they come back and look at how we're operating our utility. This year, we said we'll probably have a 1% to 2% increase because we'd already got our cost of service study back and knew that that was going to happen. As soon as we told the bond agencies that we might have a small increase, they raised our bond rating from a AA- negative outlook to a AA- positive outlook. And so just with that one statement in the report, they've increased our bond rating. And that's one reason, if we ever had to go out for a loan, we are self-funded now, but if we had to, we always want a good bond rating. And we have a good bond rating. For some reason, they look at electric utilities very harshly because they're so volatile, right? Fuel prices can really deplete the reserves of an energy department. So they look at it very closely, and they do a lot of questioning. And I appreciate John Borgett helps me out with the bond agencies, and I think we've done a great job in keeping our bond ratings up there.
So one quick follow-up. So sometimes I'll get the question, why does a department like energy need such a significant reserve? Like, why do they need reserve accounts? Shouldn't we just give that money back in the form of, lower rates or something like that? Maybe speak to, with the ice storms in Texas and the Midwest, like what that did to reserves with different energy groups.
That's not a
utilities.
leading question at all.
Not at all. But I do think it's important because if the average customer in Provo feels like we're rate increasing and we already have a reserve, those two things might not make sense. Why do we need increased rates when we already have a pretty significant reserve?
First off, to keep a good bond rating as a utility, we need to have 120 days cash on hand. So that's one item. But like you said, in Texas last year in February, they spent their whole year budget in a matter of 2 days because the natural gas prices that were about $4 per $2.50, $3 per MMBTU, all of a sudden went up to $1,000. And so their cost for electricity exploded, and they went through their whole year. In fact, some of them are still trying to figure out how to pay. They might have been a smaller utility than us, and they're on the hook for $40 million at this time. So they're working with the state government, with Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. All three of those states were hit so hard that they're trying to figure out how to pay back the money that they had to expend to provide power for those 2 to 3 days of really cold weather in Texas. What happened? You had wind farms go offline. You use the wind farms to pump gas. Gas you don't store at the plants. The gas pipes froze up. Without their wind and gas, they were within an hour of going totally dark in Texas. But it affects all the markets around there because of supply and demand. The price of fuel, just was out of sight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Whipple.
Does Provo Power does it contribute to help or heat programs or things like that?
We do have the heat program. We do contribute to that. That is done through customer service, yes, but we do help with those who cannot pay their electric bills or struggling that way.
Are you concerned that contribution would need to go up as you're increasing the rates?
Actually, I don't think so. I think the last few years we got through a pretty bad pandemic, and I think actually I don't think we'll need as many funds this next year. $2 a month. I don't foresee a big increase in heat funds.
So you don't see that the increase will push more people into needing that assistance?
I think it might push. I just don't know. I really don't know.
Okay.
I hope not. I hope $2 doesn't do that. push more people into that service.
Councilor McKay.
I really love that you had Ned Hill come and have someone from your board speak to your presentation. Thank you.
And I appreciate the board. We have a great energy board down in St. George. I think you sat with them and they're engaged. And I love that about the energy board.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Hill, and thank you all to your wonderful staff and board for all the good work you do for our city. And it's not unnoticed how much you help us financially. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll move on to item number 9, which is a presentation regarding the fiscal year 2023 budget for the library. We'll hear from Gene Nelson, the library director. Oh.
You ready for me?
Yes.
How you doing? It's great to be here. You guys had a long day, so I'm going to add
We
to it.
got a lot of candy though. We're good.
Well, I was just going to mention that.
We're good for a while.
I was going to do something almost exactly like this, but then I checked my budget and I didn't have much budget to do it. So Travis has a lot more, I think, don't you know this, don't you? He has a lot more budget than I do. But I'm still going to take 2 hours just to put you through. No, I won't do this to you. Members of the City Council, it's wonderful to be here with you to talk about our budget. And I think probably the first thing I want to do is kind of introduce just a couple of people. To my right, your left, is Carla Gordon, and she's our Assistant Director. Many of you probably have not met her, but she's been working with us for 23 years. And we put up with each other for that long, and she does a terrific job for us. To her right is Amy Lamone, and Amy is our relatively new Executive Assistant. Cindy Rowe, who had been my assistant for going on 16 years, went through our educational assistance program with the city. And what a mistake I made encouraging her to do that, because then she left. And she got her degree in accounting, and so she's now a real live accountant up in the city of South Jordan. And she's making her changes and adjustments with that. And Amy has stepped in. Amy has been working as one of our librarians on a reference desk, but she has some extraordinary skills as well in the office. And so she's been doing a terrific job with me. So I appreciate their support here. Essentially, our budget this year is the last year's budget. It really is. Next. But first of all, if you were unaware, and probably Catrice and Rachel probably are not aware of this, but about every 5 years, the state library, they have a responsibility to ask each of the libraries, public libraries in the state of Utah, for a strategic plan. And so we go through this process every 5 years. And so we're now going into that third year of the strategic planning process. So very much like your general plan, our strategic plan really drives what we're doing. And I'm going to come back to that and kind of mention something in my few short minutes. But about the only thing that has changed about the only thing that's changed on this is just a few dollars here and there that kind of changed some percentage numbers. And so in front of you is our revenue pie chart. I thought I'd just kind of give you a general overview, and if you have some questions, we'll be happy to address them. And you can tell about 80% of our budget comes from a property tax that's levied against the city's citizens of Provo. And so a large percentage comes from that. We are, I find myself kind of half defending us sometimes because we're just a different animal. And it's not like we're trying to be different and weird, but we're just very different because the large percentage of our money, you'll notice there's no money that is transferred from general fund to the library. All of our resources are ours and dedicated to library services in the city of Provo. And then you can see the rest of this little pieces of dollars that come to us, property taxes, and then we have the tax redemption, some late taxes, a little bit from vehicle taxes. Our fees, if you recall, those were here about 2 years ago. We eliminated the fees for our children's materials, and it's been very popular at the library. And so that has, we've seen our fees drop just a bit. Used books, we have a quarterly, essentially, excuse me, a quarterly used book sale that will sell books that we are weeding out of the collection or donations we don't use. Our meeting rooms, I'm happy to say that we're finally kind of getting back to normal. We went for almost 2 years with hardly having a thing happening. And now we're having events up in the ballroom, and so that revenue continues to increase. And then we have just a bit of interest income. So this really hasn't changed appreciably at all. Hardly a thing. Next. On the expenditure side, we have the large percentage is our personnel. This has gone up. As if you're in business or small business or large business, we're being impacted by incredible inflationary things happening in our payrolls. And so we've had to increase a lot of our payrolls. We couldn't even compete. When McDonald's is down the street and saying, hey, we'll pay you $15, come flip a burger, I've got to raise it because we were having jobs sit for weeks and weeks with no applications. So we had to do some raising. So that went up about a 1.5% this year, up to 63%. But largely you can see that's the bulk of our expenditures is our staff. And we have a terrific staff. And then in orange is our basic operating expenses. Like I mentioned previously, we take care of ourselves. We have the resources that we have are the ones that we have to use. And we recognize that, and I've recognized it since I arrived 25 years ago. And so we don't go to the city looking for relief or a bailout at all. For example, the last couple of years, we've spent $250,000 on new carpet, and we spent about $250,000 on a new roofing membrane for the buildings themselves. And so we have to make sure that money is set aside and in various savings accounts to deal with any potential emergencies at the library. And so that will often come out of that operating expenses. Then in green there, excuse me, something still in my throat from half hour ago. That is our print and digital collection, our collection development money. All of our books, all the databases, ebooks, audiobooks, everything comes out of that collection dollars. And then, and yes, if you were wondering, gee, are we starting to see more people reading books online? Yes, we are. We're seeing a huge growth in our online books, the electronic books, as well as people love audiobooks and just to download those. So we're starting to see that shift, what we have been anticipating for years, that we're going to start spending more and more dollars on electronic resources. And it's really happening. And then chargebacks. And so what we do, if I can explain it just very quickly, with chargebacks, as a matter of fact, John and Kelsey and I and others are having a chargeback meeting tomorrow to talk about the upcoming chargebacks. But as we use Brian's office, for example, in legal, we have an attorney who's assigned to us. And so part of our chargebacks is we pay a quantifiable amount of money that has a great formula to it that we will pay to the legal department to help them then have the resources to take care of us when we have a legal issue. Bless you. We also are paying for our HR department for all the work they do with our recruitments and payroll and advancements, everything else. We also pay charge back to the finance department with Kelsey and John and their staff in taking care of all of our POs and purchasing cards and everything else. And we pay some charge back to our facilities department to help us take care of the big ticket items at the library. So again, literally everything that happens at the Provo Library, we're paying for. And I think that's really important to recognize that. As we went through our strategic plan, I think I just have a few more minutes. Yep. As we looked at the strategic plan, we decided we've been working off of three main goals for years. But we have been talking about this for a long time, and we decided to make a fourth goal in our strategic plan, which is outreach services. I think I can safely say that chances are very slim that Provo will ever build another brick and mortar library. The world's changing, libraries are changing. A city our size probably should have a couple of branches as well, probably to the west and probably to the northeast. But chances are it's not going to happen. Excuse me. And so we've decided that, okay, if that's not going to happen, we need to take the library out to more people. And anymore, we have the technology to pull that off. And so that goal states our community will have increased opportunities to access the library. Bless your heart. Am I as bad as Travis? Maybe it's a microphone. Maybe it's not me at all. To access the library through outreach services in various Provo locations. So we're going to take the show on the road, and we've got some great shows. Next. So you see in front of you, we are picking up this outreach van in Denver. I'll be flying over on the 17th, I think, the 17th to Denver, and we're picking up the van that they've outfitted. The side that has the Academy building, that will be facing our public. And so when we pull up to a park, a farmer's market, a daycare center, a senior citizen center, they're going to see that. On the opposite side, as people drive down the street, they're going to see Provo City Library. And this is going to go all over town. And it will also have, the passenger side will have an awning that will come out of the roof, the top of the roof of the van, and we can put probably 20 or 30 kids for a story time or something other if it's a little drizzly. It will have a generator. It will also have a loudspeaker system we can just jack into and plug into. We're also going to have the capability to take, with special carts, books to senior citizen centers, books to daycare centers, and just roll them off. They'll be able to strap down. And so we've carpeted and everything else. It's really going to be very cool. We're very, very excited about this, and it's all paid for. That's a great thing. George.
Can I ask a quick question about that? I've seen a lot of neighborhoods. I know one exists in my neighborhood where they're creating their own little sort of library with sort of on a mailbox type structure. Is it possible to coordinate with some of the neighborhoods for something like that?
That's a possibility. One of the things that we're planning to, but I think that's an interesting idea to kind of maybe work with the neighborhoods, is that we're working on producing some of our own little free libraries that we can have in some spots too, including maybe, we've already had some discussions with the rec center about putting just a free library there and utilize some of those books that we sell for 50 cents for $1 just to put those in the free libraries. And if they come back, great, put them back. And if they don't, it's not going to be the end of the world. But the idea of possibly talking to some of the neighbors, I think that's a great idea. And so we'll take a look at that. We'll just make some phone calls. I think it would be terrific. They could kind of be our eyes and ears on some of these libraries, as we may be able to get around every couple of weeks. Maybe they can get around every 3 or 4 days too. So thank you.
A little more variety of books. Of course, I don't know how well the books keep inside of those structures during different weather.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
And we've read a number of articles about those across. They're popping up all over the country too. So they're a lot of fun. So our plan with our outreach is just to take our show out a little bit more. We have a lot of children that are on the outskirts, the kind of the perimeter of town, that sometimes they just can't even get to the library. You're not going to let them walk from the west side to the library. And it just breaks our hearts to see that happen. So we want to make sure we take the show out there. We have a lot of seniors who are homebound, who are in senior citizen centers, and they don't have great library facilities in most of those, since we're in discussion with those right now. And so that's part of our future for the next year. We're really excited about it. And that's our basic budget. Nothing's really changed. No surprises here, other than just a little bit more money being spent on personnel dollars. So there's my 15 minutes, probably 16.
All right. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Any additional questions, David?
I don't have any questions. I just thank you, Gene, and thank you to your service to Provo for many, many years. Really
thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you to all three of you being here.
Thank you very much, David.
Anybody else? Counselor Whipple.
I'm just disappointed that you're not dressed like the Elven King for this.
You know, my wife has really been giving me a hard time about those type of things. She says you're just dressed like an idiot sometimes. And I had thought, I had thought to do this. I really didn't. I talked to her last night and she's about slapped me silly because I did a shtick for Mayor Billings. That wasn't Mayor Kafusi. It wasn't Mayor Kurz. Mayor Billings. Lewis, if you're watching this. And so I did this shtick, the naked librarian. And all I had was a skimpy pair of shorts on. Brian, were you there?
No, I've seen the videos.
There's not very many videos about this anymore. It's on YouTube. And all I had was a yellow apron that said naked librarian on it. And my shirt was off and I looked like I didn't have anything on except for this. Marilyn Perry was our city recorder at the time. And so I was kind of at the mouth of a large three-sided square type of thing. Everybody's on this side and this side. And nobody was behind me. And so Marilyn was sitting right where George was sitting. And so I was talking about some new books, if I remember. I think it was a book review that I was doing. And I kind of walked up to Marilyn, kind of made a point with the book, and just flipped around quickly. And I just put one of those little fake bear butts on as well. And Marilyn, I thought she was going to have a heart attack. Well, she retired not long ago. Didn't really put that together. Perhaps, Rachel, that was the reason why my wife said not to do that.
But the fact that you just told us in detail what happened, I'm sure will be very reassuring to her.
On a more serious note, I'm really excited about the van and the more outreach. And I would love to see in the future satellite branches of the library, or the library being able to do programming in different community centers like the South Franklin Center and things like that. Because not just getting books, but being able to reach like the preschool reading, I don't know, story time and things like that. To be able to have that throughout the city, I think would be really helpful in the future.
Thank you. Thanks for that support, because that's one of the things we're thinking. Initially, our two-prong approach is really going to be hitting the daycare and the senior citizen centers to start. But we fully anticipate, and we won't be surprised if a couple of years that we don't add a second van to our fleet to go out, because there's a lot of people, schools and neighborhoods that would love to have us come out and do exactly those things. And so Carla and staff has been working on kind of a criteria sheet on the type of things that we're going to go to and how you can contact us with some special events in your neighborhood at a community center or a church or something like that we could go to. That's the whole goal, is getting more and more people getting that information out. And now that we have such robust wireless technology, which is also going to be in the van, that is just getting wider and wider in the ways we can utilize it. That's going to help us too with giving out cards and those type of things, because we have people that use the library every day that never step foot in the library, but they're going onto our databases. So that's part of our mission too, is going out and help them understand what they can do, what they can expect from us. And then as we get those things lined up, we'll kind of see what kind of time we have with the van. And I did want to thank Travis, but he left. Travis, bless his heart. Is he back there? Oh, no. Travis has, our van is too tall to get into our underground parking garage. And it's going to have a little Slim Jim type of an AC unit on top. And so I talked with Travis and Scott just the week before last, and they're going to allow us to park our van over at the Energy Building underneath one of the awnings. It's secured, it's out of the weather, and it's just around the corner from the library. So thank you for that support. We're really excited about the many possibilities and opportunities we're going to have with this too. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you,
so
George.
much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. Thanks for being here and for your good work.
Thank you.
All right. We'll now go on to item number 10, which is a presentation regarding the fiscal 2023 budget from legal. Brian Jones, our city attorney, will be presenting. Crack it open.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hanley and councilors. I hadn't intended to bring this, but I'm going to bring my water up with me because apparently there's either a dehumidifier up here or you're scaring us all so much that we all have dry mouth. I'm not sure what's going on, but it's a pleasure to present to you this year on the city attorney office budget. Let me grab this. So the city attorney's office is a statutorily created, the city attorney is a statutorily created position. The city code grants the city attorney's office responsibility for the city's legal affairs and makes the office responsible to both the mayor and the municipal council for those legal affairs. So this is a kind of a little chart or a little description of what we do. The office is divided into 3 different divisions. The legal services division does legal research. As Gene Nelson just mentioned, we have attorneys assigned to each department in the city. So they answer questions for them, help them with drafting things. We obviously review ordinances and resolutions and other things for the council. We review contracts. We also have a claims litigation, risk management, and safety division, which we need to come up with a acronym for because it's a little bit long. But the name is that long because functions have been added to that division over the past few years, and rather than come up with a new name, we've just kind of added the new function on there. So we'll have to rethink that because it's getting a little bit unwieldy now. But they work on the city's legal risk and represent the city's interests in court and in other legal proceedings. And then we have the criminal prosecution division. We handle the Class B and C misdemeanors and the infractions for Provo City. So we process something like, I wish I'd looked this up before I came, but something like 7,000 to 8,000 criminal cases a year in our justice court. So the one thing we don't do that we often get asked questions about is we are not the law firm for the city's citizens. Sometimes we get phone calls with people, with citizens of Provo asking us to solve a legal problem for them. Unfortunately, we have to tell them that we actually can't do that because the city itself as a legal entity is our client, and that's the only entity that we can represent. So we can't even give them legal advice and sometimes have to tell them, here's what the code says, and if you want to know what that means, you'll have to go consult your own attorney, which is always their favorite answer. But we try to help where we can. But we are somewhat limited. So I'm grateful to Travis for his visual aid because just like Travis, our operating budget is only 5% of our overall budget. So we're talking about that little blue part right there in Travis's visual aid. But let's talk about personnel first, since it is 95% of our budget. So here is a chart. And I was looking at this a minute ago. I was thinking I should have made the index on the side like 30 so that it looked, so everything was smaller. But this shows since 1996, when my predecessor started tracking these things, this shows our office staff as attorneys in the blue, paralegals in the green, and staff in the orange. The chart is visually nice, but probably a better way to look at it is this way, which is over the past 28 years, we've increased 2.5 positions, 2 attorneys and a paralegal, while reducing a half-time FTE in our staff. And in that same time, all of those increases have actually been occasioned by additional responsibilities being given to the office. So up until 2011, the city attorney's office wasn't doing the council work, and about 2015, 16, the city's safety and risk management program was also added to our office, and so that led to the increases. So returning to the operating budget, let me explain this. this is a little bit different. For those of you who remember last year's presentation, this is largely similar to last year's slide, but I added this orange line. And so let me explain a little bit about what the orange line represents. In 2015, the city made some changes to the way the budget was shown, and they started allocating some money to what we call the computer bank fund, where they were giving us money. So prior to that time, if we needed new computers, we either had to just scrape together money from elsewhere inside our budget, or we had to go ask for a supplemental. At that time, they started putting a line item in the budget every year to account for needing to replace computers on a regular basis. There also were some changes that happened with some software that we had to additionally license for our criminal database and police records access. And so in 2015, the big increase in 2015 is when those two things, which were already being paid for, but were being paid for outside of our monitored budget, got added to our budget. So the orange line is what our budget looks like if you take those things back out. So that's more of a representation of what was being tracked before 2015, if that makes sense. And then, but then 2015, the blue line demonstrates the overall budget, but some things that weren't included before. And then this is a slide that I showed last year that is pretty revealing. This is the budget since 1996 if you adjust it for inflation. So you can see that with one brief blip in 1998, we've never had the purchasing power since 1996 that we did in 1996. As far as what the operating budget goes for, our biggest ticket items are for software. We have a system that we use to access criminal records. We have a system that we use to access the police databases so we can see their reports for our criminal proceedings. And we have a system that we use for legal research. And we have a system that we use for case files. And all of those obviously have licensing charges and things. And so that's actually our biggest ticket item. Under that is membership in professional organizations like the International Municipal Lawyers Association, and making sure that our lawyers have the training that they need to stay up to speed. We also have a line item that we often don't use all of, but is kind of essential when we need to, which is for contracting outside professional services. So for instance, there's a provision of city code that says the city attorney's office cannot advocate in front of a city board and give advice to the city board at the same time, because that would be a conflict. So for instance, if we have an employee matter that goes before the Civil Service Commission, someone from our office might represent the city in the city's position over the disciplinary matter, but we actually hire an outside attorney to advise the board so that they're getting independent legal advice while they consider the matter. And then our next biggest ticket item is equipment, computers, supplies. We unfortunately still have to use a lot of paper for a lot of things. But every year that's diminishing as there's more and more stuff with the courts that we can e-file and do that way. So final slide, challenges that we see coming. I guess, well, let me just, preface that by saying, just like Gene Nelson, who just presented to you, our budget this year is the same as last year's budget, and in fact, pretty much the same as the last 5 or 6 years, other than not including the couple of years when we were asked to make cuts, or the year we were asked to make cuts for the pandemic. So we basically returned to pre-pandemic and are just asking for the same budget that we've had for the last 4 or 5 years. But I did want to kind of bring to mind some challenges that we see on the horizon. So the first one was that during the pandemic, we saw some pretty significant strains on our personnel. Part of that had to do with, because of the hiring freeze that came through the pandemic, we spent about 6 months short an attorney. And while I think our staff did a fantastic job of weathering that, it revealed some real strains in the office. I mean, it had a significant impact on workloads and timeliness of things. And in fact, I was just thinking probably 3 or 4 weeks ago that we've now been up to full staffing for about 9 months now. And I kind of feel like we're just barely getting back to the point where everything is where the workloads and things have returned to where they were before. So one of the things that showed us is that we're probably pushed kind of to the max as far as that additional responsibilities, additional things that we needed to take care of would probably start to incur some personnel challenges. And we do have some unknowns that are on the horizon, not actually shown on the chart of our personnel. We have one half-time criminal position that I don't show on the chart because it's actually funded by a federal grant. And that person handles domestic violence work exclusively based on a VAWA grant. That grant is up to expire this year. We've applied for a renewal. We think we'll get the renewal, but another year or two down the road, we don't know that will happen again. And talking with Steve Schreiner, our city prosecutor, I think that if we get to a point where we aren't able to renew that grant funding, it'll probably have a pretty significant impact on our criminal caseload if we have to absorb that back in. Now, those were cases that that was a function that we were handling before the grant position ever existed, but with corresponding increases in workload over time, that position has made it easier for us to absorb some things that may have been difficult otherwise. Another interesting change that's coming is there was a law passed just in the last legislative session where either prosecutors or defendants can choose to have domestic violence cases tried in the district court instead of the justice court. And there's a whole spiel about the reasons for that I could go into, but I won't unless you have questions about it for time purposes. But we don't yet know how that's going to affect us, because right now we send our prosecutors almost entirely just to justice court. If we start having a significant number of these cases that are in the district court at the same time as we have court calendars in the justice court, that could also affect us. There's also been, and this was mentioned in the justice court's presentation to you back when when Administrative Services did their budget presentation, there is a discussion out there about amending the Constitution or other statutory changes to actually allow justice courts to handle Class A misdemeanors. If that were to happen, that would obviously have a significant impact not only on the justice court, but on our office as well, because it'd be a pretty significant increase in our caseload. So we don't know where that's at. It's kind of an idea that's being floated. There's been recommendations made, but we don't, I've heard some people say it's 3 to 4 years down the road, and other people say the next legislative session, they might be considering it. So that's just an unknown for us. And then related to, in some ways, to the presentation that IS gave a while back, we're behind on our equipment. We've got 25 computers in the department currently. Only 8 of those are actually in warranty. And if you remember from the IS conversation, they don't support the ones that aren't in warranty. So that means they're not necessarily getting security patches. They're not necessarily getting updates, depending on their service. Additionally, we have our major piece of equipment is a copier printer that we need to replace every 7 years. Fortunately, it's being replaced this year as part of the move outside of our budget, but we do need to set aside money, optimally 1/7 of that every year in order to be prepared for replacing it. Well, our current computer bank budget that I described just a few minutes ago is only $7,000. Which after we set aside the money for the copier means we could probably only replace 2 computers a year to try to stay in cycle. Well, so we've looked at that pretty seriously. We have a plan. We're going to, with the move to the new building, we've kind of optimized the structure. We're actually going to reduce the inventory from 25 to 19. We also had some bank funds set aside and saved, and we've identified some other funds that we managed to save during this year's budget. We've already used that to order enough computers to get us back to where only 3 of the 19 will be out of cycle when we start the next fiscal year, and we intend to replace those next year. So I think we'll be in a good place come the beginning of next fiscal year, but I noted that it would actually require that $7,000 figure to be $17,000 in the future in order for us to stay in cycle going forward. And like I said, we're not making an ask at this time, but that's kind of a preview of what might be something that would be coming next year. So, and that's all I had. If there's any questions that I can answer.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions? Yeah, Councilor Whipple.
So with WebEx and everything, did that affect your caseloads or how much people were able to appear?
It had an indirect effect on us. It affected the court more than it did us. And because it affected the number of people that could appear in the court, it put their calendars behind, which now post-pandemic, they feel some pressure to recover from that, which has led to them asking for us to try to figure out how to appear in more calendars, right? They're still debating their options, but one of the options that they've considered is actually adding another calendar to the schedule. But we've had some ongoing discussions about whether we can feasibly actually handle that or not. And if there's other ways that we can help them catch up on that backlog.
Yeah, because if they add another calendar, would you need to add more personnel to be able to accommodate that?
Well, that would be the big question, right? And that's kind of the discussion that we've been having with the court right now is we feel pretty strongly that is probably likely. And so we've kind of, at this point, we've been trying to help them identify other ways and other things that we can do and other things that we can cooperate in doing to alleviate the backlog, which we're quite optimistic that the backlog isn't that bad and can probably be remedied fairly quickly, and so wouldn't require that in the long term. But that's one of our discussion points.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay, we'll now go on to our last item before for the afternoon agenda. Which is item number 11, a discussion regarding the council's budget priorities for fiscal year 2022-23, presented by John Magnus.
Technically, it's not budget priorities, it's still actionable priorities. Last week?
I can mention what he said. So we are circling back to our discussion from our budget retreat on Tuesday last week regarding priorities generally.
Okay, got to figure out where we left off from last time.
So this will be a little challenging for Mr. Fillmore and Mr. Hoban to see, but I can describe what I'm seeing if that's
the notepad here is really just for us to write down.
okay.
It's not nothing is going to be written on this that we're not going to talk about, so they won't really miss anything.
All right.
Yeah, we'll go over each one by line by line. So we left off of public safety. This was listed by quite a few of you as an important issue that you wanted to achieve in the next 2 years. One, you wanted to increase the personnel to meet our growing demands. Enhance was a word that was used a lot, enhance the public safety. Maintain officers and firefighters, which we have been doing. We did give them quite a bit of raise last year to match what's happening with the rest of the agencies around the state. One, you wanted to make sure we were leadership in Utah County, that Provo was the #1 agency. And then there was a request for an FTE for a patrol around BYU for safety for females coming on and off the campus at the, early morning, late night times. So that's how we want to start the discussion, is how important these are to you. What do you guys want to see us do? What kind of policies would you be looking for? Is this strictly trying to find budgetary items to increase FTEs? So we'll leave it up to you guys to start the discussion.
Mr. Shipley.
Yeah, I think, and I'll just start it and then we can see where it goes. But I think my thought on this is that I ever since I've been on the council, I've been anxious to see kind of a longer term, 5-year, 10-year plan for personnel for police. So I feel like we get kind of a once a year. I don't know what the reason for, I just don't see like the end from the beginning very well. we just get an ask and then we kind of try to put out that fire and, and then we look at the next year. And I think we can take, population projections and we can take airport needs. And I think we could, I'm sure there's been meetings about this, where we say, look, over the next 5 years, we'll probably need, 10 additional officers. And so in my simple way of thinking, we need to work at that every year, and get an officer or two each year. I think last year, that's kind of where the discussion came to. I don't think it was part of the budget. I think we asked extra, for 1 or 2 and the mayor had asked for a handful, a few years before that. And so, but again, I think what's missing in my mind is like, as we plan for this particular thing, we all, I think, are uniform or agreed that we want to support, public safety in Provo, but having kind of that roadmap is what I'm hoping for from this piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, it's kind of, I feel like the airport was maybe a factor that in my years going back hadn't been conceived of at the time, so there could be things on the horizon that develop like that present additional challenges. But it has, in the 4 years I've been on the council, every year it's obvious that we need some increase. Although I've sensed from the police chiefs, maybe Chief Ferguson mostly, since I'm referring to previous history, that even though there was that number of 120, I think it was, that was stated as sort of the ideal number for our population, I haven't had the impression that even Chief Ferguson, and I don't want to put words in his mouth if I misunderstood him, but I didn't sense that he felt like that number was necessarily what Provo would need, given some of the conditions of Provo. But that being said, I think we saw it with Chief Ross too. There's a hesitancy to ask for too much. I don't know what he'll come back and ask for, but obviously in his initial presentation to us, I don't think he wanted to come in and say, and I'm going to need, this many officers. But I will mention, I'll just provide a little more feedback on that last item with regard to BYU. We, Councilor Ellsworth and I met with Chief Ross and with Chief Andrus at BYU. Chief Ross, of course, is still relatively new and he's kind of getting his orientation. But from what I remember Chief Ferguson saying and what he confirmed is it's not just the issue of safety, which was our primary reason to meet with them, which they agreed was an issue, but it's also with regard to potential assault. That is also the area where there's probably the most petty theft anywhere in the city. And so, given the way Chief Ferguson used to talk, smart policing always involves sort of targeting areas in the city where they know certain kinds of problems are frequent. But Chief Ross simply said, well, gee, if I had one officer whose full-time job it was to just have a police car in those streets, people can see that there's a police officer nearby, that has a tremendous deterrent, creates a tremendous deterrent for petty crime and for assault. And there may be some lighting issues. I think we talked about that too, that could be improved in Joaquin for safety as well. But so I just thought we should flag that particular issue as one possible immediate need, but there may be others that the chief feels he has that, you know, he would also want to give priority to. I don't know in the end, but that's where that came from. I just wanted to explain the context from that. I mean, I'll just add one other quick thought. I mean, as we're listening to a lot of these budget presentations, it's pretty obvious that, I mean, there's some departments that aren't asking for money, which is nice. And I don't mind when people do ask for money because I know they're asking for legitimate reasons, but we need to, this is going to be hard because there are a lot of increases in expenses and needs in the city that we are going to have to address simultaneously. So it's hard. It's hard, but I think we have to remember that one police officer is 220,000.
No, I think it was like 120 to 140,000 to start them. It's the salary in the car. The first year is expensive because I can look at it again and get you the
I
numbers.
thought it was more than that the first year because of the car. The car's like car and equipment was something like 70,000 as I recall. But anyway,
we can get the number.
And the medical benefits and all that. It's quite a bit of money.
Okay. Is there anybody online or is?
No.
Travis is around.
It's like Mr. Palmer has a comment.
Yeah, I'll chip in. Sure.
Please.
I'm all in favor of the BYU patrol cop. I think that'd be money well spent.
Okay, well, this is most likely going to be a budgetary item. Policy-wise, there's not a lot we can do legislatively, so this is going to be a budgetary item.
And I think the other item I was going to add is with respect to cops at the airport. That's something we simply have to have. The question is it possible to phase it in, or do we need to do it all at once? And that may require a little refinement, but we really have no choice on that one.
Isaac, do you remember, is that an FAA requirement that we're up against?
You do have to have an officer or someone with the ability, with a gun on site at certain hours. So yeah.
The plane's landing and why it's there.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics, but it's around when planes are there, passengers are there.
So we'll find out what the FAA requirement is and get back to you guys. Remember, this will kind of guide your budget decisions when you come up with our budget priorities. There's priorities that you have in here, the ones that are fiscal, we'll pull out and present those to you as some budgetary items for your priorities.
The other thing I would mention, John, I really can't read your chart there, but the 800-pound gorilla in this whole thing is, of course, city center redevelopment. I just don't know, how we calibrate that at this point. But that's a huge factor. It's got to be front and center in anything we do.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will be. The administration can give us a little more information. So we've heard from Public Works during the presentation, and you guys have also talked about Public Works and the culinary water treatment facility that they have talked about bringing, so they can we could process our own water, not have to have it processed by somebody else, and the groundwater aquifer restorage are the two projects that came up. And then there was someone who brought up to make sure that whatever we're doing for Public Works, water, wastewater, stormwater, that we are actually covering our cost of O&M and replacement. And from what I remember, the last budget hearings, we have been. That's why we have those pretty steep rate increases. So we can actually pay for the sewer treatment plant and the rate increases. We just want to make sure going forward that we're not put in the same position where we don't raise rates for years. And all of a sudden we're raising rates 5 and 10% a year to catch up. So that was listed on something you had listed as a priority to make sure that policies are in place. So is there anything else? I mean, open discussion up to you guys. That's what basically was told to us.
Yeah, I'll just add on the water treatment facility that for me, financially, I think it makes sense, but perhaps most importantly, it's a self-sufficiency issue for Provo City. I just think it's one of those things that, at some point, we should at least have that as even there's a backup, with the facility that we currently use, but our primary source of treatment, if we can do that internally, I think is really important to our own security. Anyway, that's why I put that up there.
I was going to say, David, I just a loud amen to that. After my first priority is always public safety, but right after that, it's got to be water security.
Oh, and the last thing we had, I think this is George Councilor Whipple, was the sidewalk. We do not have a lot of money currently for the sidewalk repair program. So we're not repairing much sidewalk every year. So that was something that was brought up as an issue. It's both public works and public safety, because some of this is our safe routes for the schools. So that was something that Councilor Whipple brought up for you as a discussion point.
Go ahead, Councilor McKay.
I think we all recognize that that's something that's lacking. And there's many parts of Provo that don't even have sidewalks. And there's plenty that have ones in poor repair. But I know that this is something that frustrates Public Works also, though, because I've talked to them about it, and it's just a money issue, right? It's 100% money. And we have that taxing in place right now that allows us to have some it goes towards roads mostly for our road upkeep, but that's even, it's just, we don't have the funds for it. So I don't know how to we have to take it from something else to make it so it gets tricky. I've wondered about this with some of our ARPA funds.
Councilor Whipple.
Yes, even if we can't dedicate more money to the sidewalk repair, I think we need to look at having a clear and more accountable program for when sidewalks are reported as in need of repair. Because when people do a 301 request, sometimes someone will come out and they'll be told that, oh, it's at least 4 years before this can get addressed. So to have some way for a person to know when their thing could get fixed so that they can follow up and everything would help. And that seems like it shouldn't take a lot of money to do, but it would be able to give people a clear expectation of what we can do with the money that we have. Hearing that it might happen in 4 years is like being told it's never going to get done.
I will add there, Rachel, just to be helpful. The folks over at Public Works do have a long-term plan. They prioritize and schedule various road and sidewalk improvements. They have their own criteria, I guess, for establishing those priorities. But it is in several years out that they're thinking on those things. I would just want to underscore the reality that we not only have sidewalks that need repair, we have some areas that just need sidewalks, period. So, for example, North Canyon Road, the residents there have been clamoring for sidewalks for years. And I know Public Works is taking a strong look at that, but need to not lose sight of that. The other thing, as long as we're talking about transportation right now, if you recall, a year or so ago, we commissioned Public Works to do a study on how to slow down the dangerous speeding thoroughfare effect on Slate Canyon Drive. And they came back with a recommendation for a couple of traffic circles. And we certainly elevated the expectations of the citizens there in Shannon's district. She's not online with us right now, so I'll speak up for her. I just think that those traffic circles on Slate Canyon Drive should be a high priority. And I would hope we could find the money for that. That's just a traffic disaster waiting to happen. That's the most unsafe road in the city, I think.
Councilor McKay.
I just want to put a plug in for my app idea. I still think we need an app to put in like potholes and sidewalks and take pictures of, residents can take pictures of them, send them in with the address. I think it'll be awesome.
I wanted to thank Councillor Fillmore. I know every year with the bike committee, we talk about the planned improvements for streets and everything, what they're going to be repaving. And I understand that they have a similar thing for sidewalks. The problem is that's just not really accessible to the public. So we don't know when the city's working on different areas or when your area could potentially come up. And so if we can't get additional funds to increase the spending, I think we can at least do something to let people know when the work is going to be done.
I think that's a good idea. At least find out where you are on the schedule, right?
It would be handy to have something where a citizen can literally just put in the address and and it'll say this road will be done in 2 years. This sidewalk will be looked at in 3 years.
We can talk to administration and public works about trying to get something developed. We have 2 years. This is a 2-year cycle. So last one was traffic, and every counselor had something to say about traffic. So this is like the number one issue where you guys all have a concern. So we have 35 minutes to talk about traffic. So we have the traffic, we have the east-west corridor, Slate Canyon Roll, South State, the entrance to Provo Town Center, more bike lanes, create a connected network, work with UTA for better bus stops, enhance services.
By the way, could anybody fill us in? What's the current status on the proposed bus stop on 9th East?
Isaac, I'll leave that for you.
Or George, do you know?
I haven't heard anything recently, so I think we're all on the same, they're working on discussions and UTA's trying to find funding and.
They were supposed to come to us with, right, a budget for it and a proposal for where they were going to get funding, what city contribution might be.
That sounds right.
That's kind of what I remember, but
Is that a typical city contribution thing? Or is this viewed somehow as being unique?
I don't know. I mean, I can see if I can get any more information, but I'm sort of assuming their point of contact has been Wayne more than.
My recollection is the discussions have been focused on UTAs, maybe MAG as well, looking for funding. I haven't been aware of Provo City trying to, of the heat being put on Provo City to try to fund this stop.
Yeah.
Instead, it's okay. Let's get this on the plans. Let us get to work as this is UTA saying this, and let's work with MAG and let's see if we can figure out a way.
I think my concern that maybe is behind Mr. Fillmore's question is that the music building is starting to look like it's nearing completion, and that's going to start creating some pretty serious parking issues in that area. And this came up. This idea of the stop came up in the context of the discussion about parking as it related to the new music building as a desirable way to mitigate the parking pressures that were going to happen. Because as you all know, the music building sucked up a good 2/3 of the parking that was available on the east side of the campus. So it's gone. And the neighborhood's worried about it spilling over into the neighborhood, obviously. Yeah.
If you look back to the what's it called? Not the light rail, but the bus the fast bus. What's UVX? I was going to say, if you look back to when UVX started, the city didn't contribute money at that point either. The city's contribution was
to lease to UTA space on the streets for the lanes and the stops, which was then used as matching funds. The value of the lease was used as matching funds for federal dollars that were received. The only thing that I've heard of so far about the new stop is a similar idea that there's agreements out there to be negotiated about the city's contribution of the right to access the streets, but I haven't heard anything about money.
Well, if you can find out anything more from Wayne, I don't know if he knows anything more, but go ahead, Councilor McKay.
Kind of on this subject, I am interested if there's anything we can do to get BYU to make a parking structure, whether it's next to the new fine arts building where they have their current visitor parking, or over there south in Joaquin in those lots they have for students. I would love to be able to get a conversation going on that.
Leadership can request a meeting with BYU to discuss that if that's what you would like. There's also the new property that will be available at the current location of Wasatch Elementary, which BYU I don't think has made any indications yet as to what they're going to use that property for, but they're starting the process of preparing the ground for the construction of the new Wasatch Elementary on the BYU property on Locust Lane. So presumably they must be in deliberation about what they're going to use for that space as well. And I'm assuming they need to know some resolution about whether or not this stop is going to happen as well.
Yeah.
So I'll make a note of that, and I've got sort of a running list of things that I need to talk to request a meeting to talk to BYU about. So,
George, in all your history with interacting with BYU on things, has there ever been a discussion about a large parking structure there close to campus? Is this
not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of, yeah.
I mean, if we had a public-private partnership where we were willing to even go 50-50 on such a thing, do you think there'd be any appetite for that, given the very limited parking there on campus? Not to mention co-ed safety.
I don't have any idea, but that's a good question to get an answer to if we can.
Yeah.
I can report one more.
Yeah.
There have been 2 neighborhood meetings in case anyone was not aware, and a lot of positive feedback for them going forward. So again, UTA is looking into plans and possible funds.
I think this appeared elsewhere, maybe under Parks and Rec, but I mentioned the Rock Canyon Master Plan. A key component of that master plan is a new roundabout at 1450 East and North Temple, right at the entrance to the parking lot of Rock Canyon. And that has a lot of, as Mr. Decker knows, a lot of implications for engineering, interfacing with Parks and Rec. So, and I don't know what, if there, anyway, I'm interested in seeing to it that we start implementing the Rock Canyon Master Plan. And it seemed to me that was one of the first stages of it, but also one of the more expensive ones. So I don't know if that's a factor in either slowing it down or in expediting it, but I'd like to make sure that's on our radar as well. And with regard to UTA, enhanced bus services, bus stops, I mean, besides the 9th East, I think UTA's next question really was sort of what's known as sort of the last mile, or I guess that's what it's called, but it's just sort of, what are we doing with regard to helping people get to and from the bus stops quickly, so that the bus gets used more frequently. And I know their longer term project involves some extension, which we don't really have a lot of direct influence over. But one thing I know the administration was looking at, and I haven't heard anything for a while, is about electric bike services Do we know anything more about what's happening there? And that would be a public-private partnership. I mean, I don't know that it requires us to spend money, but it does require us to sign some sort of contract, right, with a private rental service.
Yes, we're looking at the conclusion of a contract with our scooter provider and are currently at least having internal meetings to look at whether we can get a provider who would bring e-bikes in. Is that what you're talking about? Where
Yeah.
it's someone who brings in bikes. So stay tuned.
Okay. Other discussion of transportation woes, dreams, complaints. Yeah. Counselor Whipple.
So far, we've been adding bike lanes as the city's been redoing roads, just as it will repave or resurface. If that's an area that's designated on the bike master plan, then it will go ahead and paint in the bike lane for that area. But we are not proactively adding bike lanes unless it happens to coincide with work that we're already doing. And I would love to see if there's any way that we can designate some of our transportation funds to starting to build out that bike network without only waiting for work to be done.
Counselor McKay? No? Okay.
Just to let you know, when they're talking about the entrance to the Provo Town Center, that was to make it more pedestrian friendly and also easier to access. I think we can cover that when we talk about doing the intent statement for the redevelopment of that area. That whatever they do over there, you would like to see that people from Nordic College can get across that road safely somehow and make it more pedestrian friendly on that side of town when they're coming from that entrance on the off ramps, making sure they can get into when they redevelop it, they can get in and out of it easily with traffic wise. So we can work on that intent statement and work with traffic to come up with something.
Yeah, and that's a natural segue to the discussions we've had on enhancing our gateways into the city. First and foremost being West Center. But I don't think there's any money to allocate until we get our studies done. We really need to get going sometime soon on some creative feasibility studies on what could be done to enhance West Center and South State and so on.
Well, that maybe raises another issue, and Mr. Decker may have some thoughts about this. I mean, when we had the presentation, however many weeks ago it was now, about possible ways to transform Center Street, and there were some plans over the next several months, right, this summer to experiment with some of those things. If I'm remembering correctly, we had, I think we had the least expensive option, the most expensive option. And I guess it just sort of becomes a question of whether or not we are going to be in any kind of position to seriously consider any of the more expensive options, or are we stuck with the least expensive ones? Because if we really want to enhance Center Street, it seems like we're going to have to put some money into it.
Yeah, if I might just editorialize on that a bit, George. In my meetings with TMAC thus far, it's apparent that they have a variety of options, and they wanted to do some experiments this summer as to the feasibility of various things. I think they're ways away from making a concrete recommendation what to do. Dave may want to comment on that. He knows more about it than I do, but they definitely want to make that 5-block stretch much more pedestrian friendly. Actually 7 blocks more pedestrian friendly, slow down the traffic, and there are a variety of techniques for doing that and for encouraging more traffic on First North to get out to the freeway. And so maybe it may behoove us to have a more concrete presentation of more finite options on that and explain exactly what Public Works is planning on doing this summer, if they're ready to make that presentation to the full council. And also the other thing is that we've got this whole McQuinney thing up in the air, but it would be really nice if whatever we do, we anticipate blending that in nicely to future development of the city center area.
Counselor McKay?
I'm just curious, is Center Street considered a main arterial where like MAG and UDOT are involved at all? Like 500 and stuff?
That I don't know. I'd have to find out.
Does Dave Decker know?
Dave, do you know?
Well, we don't want it to be an arterial. That's the problem. It's become a de facto arterial.
Right, but I just wonder legally if it's considered one by the state.
So Center Street is part of our master plan. It's a city road. It's not a UDOT road. But it is considered, it's either a minor arterial or a major collector. It's one of those two categories. But UDOT does not, UDOT road ends at 500 West. So between I-15, it's actually between Geneva and 500 West. It's a UDOT road. East of there, it's not. It's a city road.
Okay, we have covered everything. We will now take this back. We've already been working on the list. We'll break them up in two groups, one policy issues that we'll be working on, and some will be budgetary, and the budgetary ones we'll bring back, we'll send out through emails, try to develop a list of budgetary priorities for the council from these actionable items that we discussed.
John, there are two other things I think are pretty high priorities. I just want to throw them out. One is we've got a very significant budgetary request from our cybersecurity people to beef up what we have there. I think that ought to be high on our list. The other one, what was the other one? Oh, it's need to get a better handle on any immediate needs for that sports complex out by the lake in order to keep that project rolling. That's a big number there, if I recall correctly. $8 million over the next, was it 4 years?
No, if you wanted to finish it in 2 years, it's $8 million.
Okay.
We'd have to come up with approximately $8 million if we want to get it done in the next 2 years, because I think it's scheduled to get done in 2026.
Yeah.
And they still haven't identified all their funding. They probably will come and make an ask for us at some point. But has
anybody indicated if that qualifies for ARPA money?
There's $10 million of ARPA funds that we can use any way we want. There is possibility to wash a little bit of the $22 million. Other than that, no, it does not qualify for the $22 million.
Okay.
That's it. We will get working on this and try and get it out next week to you guys so we can start. In May, we're going to start our budgets. We will have probably meetings every week to do all the presentations so we can get done and you guys can decide what you want to do with the budget.
Thank you. All right. What's that? So let's see, a closed session has been requested. Mr. Jones, do you want to explain?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So there's been a request for a closed session. It has to do with character and competency of an individual, which is one of the permitted reasons for holding a closed session under the statute. So it'd be appropriate for a motion at this time.
Okay, I'll look for a motion to, the wording is
so moved.
To close the meeting.
To close the meeting and to go into closed session.
So moved.
Mr. Fillmore makes the motion. Mr. Shipley makes the second. I'll call for a verbal roll call. Mr. Let's see, we'll go to Councilor Whipple. Yes. Councilor Shipley. Yes. Councilor McKay.
Yes.
And Councilor Fillmore.
Yes.
And I will vote yes, so that's 5 in favor. Is Travis online?
Yes, Councilor
Oh,
Hogan
sorry,
says
Travis.
yes. That's
Thank
all
you.
right. What time will we be having the meeting?
4:30.
Okay.
Yeah, it says 4:10 on the 4:30. Okay. We'll plan on 4:30. Travis, I'll text you if that changes.
All right,
So that
thank you.
was 6 votes in favor with Counselor Ellsworth excused. We'll see you back again, or reconvene back at 5:30.
4:30. Well,
I mean,
we'll be in
4:30
recess
for the
until
closed
4:30.
session. Yeah.
Recording stopped.